Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias. Welcome to day 2 of our Two Nations, One Water 2021 program. Before we begin today, I'm just going to give a quick overview of some of the features and special things for today's program. First of all, remember we do have English and Spanish interpretation available. You can find the globe icon at the bottom of your toolbar. Simply click that, choose your language, and you can also choose to turn it off as well if you prefer to listen in both languages. Just a reminder, we're going to be doing some giveaway prize drawings today for those who are present during the conference. We have some reprints of historic postcards depicting the Acequia Madre of Ciudad Juarez, as well as mid-19th century lithograph prints. And then a little bit later as well, we have, towards the end of the conference, today we have a poster captured from Landsat 8 imagery of the tri-state region of Chihuahua, New Mexico, and Texas. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Sam Fernald to introduce the first of our presenters today. So Sam, take it away.
Okay, I'm very lucky to present to our group today, Denise Ivana Perales. She is an attorney with 20 years of experience in environmental law with a license to practice in Mexico, holding a master's degree in sciences of law, JSM from Stanford, and certified by Duke University in collaboration with the USCEQ regarding National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. And Ms. Perales has been professor of environmental law in Mexico. She's the founder of her own firm, Verela and Non-Toxic Place LLC. And I've heard some about her amazing work to really make a difference when it comes to water and how we use it. And I can't wait to hear your presentation. So take it away, Denise.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you, Mark, and thank you, Alfredo, and thank you, everybody, for being here. And well, I'm going to start right now because we don't have too much time, I think. Okay. Well, today we're going to start talking about the ACEQUIAS, and I know some of you are experts in ACEQUIAS, especially people who has been working regarding ACEQUIAS in New Mexico because of the vast experience we already have. But now what I'm going to do is to try to talk about ACEQUIAS from a different perspective. So next. Well, sometimes when we talk about ACEQUIAS, we talk about the ACEQUIAS when we're made, and we remember everything about the colonial period and things, but we also have to value the work done before, and to remember that the people who was living before the pre-Columbian people who was there was also trying to do something like an ACEQUIA, not in the sophisticated way, which was during the colonial period, but in a very important way too. Next. One thing that I want to talk about is that one of the first ACEQUIAS were built here in this area. So when we talk about the ACEQUIAS, we are also talking about the history of El Paso del Norte. So our valley has been marked by the ACEQUIAS too, the food, the culture, everything. So when we say that we are like a new race, the Americans, the new Americans, we are like a new race. We are like the ACEQUIAS too, as a new thing here. And that's something beyond the environment, that we are part of the environment. And and we have to respect the acequias from a different perspective. Well, what are the acequias? Well, at the end of the colonial period, we can recognize that the acequias were almost all around the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo river, and who were in charge of that area. It's important because the political structure was not like we have today. So let me show you the next. And many people, when we say, well, we are from Chihuahua, we are from Texas, we are from New Mexico, they say, oh, that's an arid place. But they sometimes forget everything about the climate around acequias. And the acequias are creating a new ecosystem. And we have to recognize that and respect that and value that because all the protection to the soil, humidity, and everything. So next. This is an example of one of the acequias here in El Paso del Norte Valley. This is in the Mexican side. This is so unfortunate because this acequia was recently almost destroyed for bad management of the political parties and everything. And now we're taking a plan to restore it. But that's one of the acequias. Next. Well, at the beginning, we have to remember who was in charge of the acequias. That was not the Spaniards, that was the new people living here, because we are part of that new people. And it covers New Mexico, of course, but Chihuahua was known at that time as Nueva Vizcaya. It covers Coahuila, which was smaller because Nueva Vizcaya includes more, Nuevo Reino de León, now Nuevo León, Santander, which is Tamaulipas. And Texas was not precisely a huge receiver of the water, but just going to the Gulf of Mexico. But in this area of El Paso del Norte Valley, Texas was not included. Next. Even during the first decades after the Mexican independence, Texas was not part of this evolution of how to treat and understand the acequia. So this is very important because this is one of the main reasons why New Mexico has taken the leadership regarding acequias, because Texas is just kind of learning still a lot about acequias. And of course, here in Mexico, we have like a disaster topic. We're going to talk a little bit more about it later. What else? After the mid-19th century is when finally Texas is important part of the acequias topic. But Texas adopted the acequias in a very easy way, considering just the common law principles, like if you had it before, it's yours. It means the water rights. It means whatever you have. So there was not a huge controversy during a long time, but this is something that we have to recognize. In the acequias in the states have now a triple inheritance: the Anglo-American, the pre-Columbus people, which sometimes we don't want to talk about names of that people, but that matters. And they were the Apaches first, who were the leading group at that time until the Comanches arrived. They were stronger than Apaches, and many people here you can see with the eyes. Sometimes the physical anatomy still remains a lot of the Comanches, because we are in a way still carrying DNA Comanche and Apache and everything of that. So, and the Mexican, and I say Mexican because Mexicans is it's a very complex combination of races and cultures and everything. So the ACEQUIAS law and values in Mexico, on the other hand, just have a double inheritance, just the pre-Columbus people and the Mexican people, but not the Anglo-American culture and everything. So this is a problem when we talk about ACEQUIAS, because the perspective of the ACEQUIAS is very different in not only between New Mexico and Texas, but among the 3 states. So next, please. Here we are in the middle of that combo. And now we try to figure out how we are going to deal with this if we have different perspective, different heritage now, and different many things. How we're going to preserve the ACEQUIAS, and why are we going to preserve them at the end? So next. Let's talk about a different perspective. When we try to understand the backgrounds, we are trying to respect the culture of the people who is, beyond the ACEQUIAS. And most of the people in New Mexico understand this, but when we talk about this topic in Texas or Chihuahua state, it's just like, what are you talking about? What people? Oh, we almost extinct the Comanches to nothing, just like, what are you talking? What people? Well, we are the people who need to feel the respect of that. Not just the farmers who are hundreds of miles ago, but the neighbors of those ACEQUIAS who still remain inside the cities of El Paso and Juarez and all the New Mexico, of course. So that's the thing why we're talking a little bit more about this. Next. That's the thing that we're talking about. So the Mexicans, it's not just, it's just like the Native Americans and the Spaniards. Well, that Native Americans not were precisely the Comanches. There were different block of people. Mexicans were more mixed with Tlaxcaltecs, with Jews, with African Americans, with the other indigenous pre-Columbus people, etc. And at the end, after all these, but very recently, by mid-19th century, we start mixing Mexicans with Apaches and Comanches and Anglo-Americans. So it's kind of a lot of people going in the same with different perspectives of water. Next. But well, at the end of all this mess and everything, we finally celebrate a convention between America and Mexico, and everything was ratified and proclaimed, etc. What else? And the convention between the United States and Mexico talk about the waters of the Rio Grande and Rio Bravo. And since the article #1, they say and talk about the headworks of the Acequia Madre. So it's something relevant since that age, and it's supposed to be like great happy ending story. Next. Based on that convention of the 1884, we can find the origins of the now International Waters Boundary Commission. And this is some example of a map made by the Commission in 1914. So we can see they already recognize, all the acequias from the Mexican side and the value of this, and everything seemed kind of good. But what happened here? Next. Well, in Las Cruces, New Mexico, as I told you, they have the leading in this topic. And they even have a symposium in 2013, this topic. They also take advantage of a research project funded by the National Science Foundation. They recognize the number of acequias associations can be maybe around 700. And they recognize that also with all the research done, the symbiosis and the interconnection existing between the acequias and the groundwater, which we're talking a lot about this yesterday, the speakers. Next. Well, the acequias was concluded by New Mexico experts about how the technological systems are designed, maintained, operate, etc., and the paramount importance of the same. So it seems like a really nice understanding of this. Next. But do we have a happily ever after? I don't think so. What happened? What is this? I mean, I show you all the stuff. Well, how is this possible? Well, next. Well, Essex Ecosystem has been seriously damaged in large portion of the El Paso del Norte Valley, mainly, honestly, in the Mexican side of the valley. Yeah, this is not like a really nice thing. It looks like an awful thing. Next. Some people have been trying out to preserve the Essex ecosystem, and they have even done very radical things like naming each of the main trees. For example, this tree is called Esperanza, which means hope. And she said, oh, my name is Hope. I'm 40 years old and I'm your friend. Why do you wanna kill me? So this is the sort of thing that people is doing right now, trying to preserve the ecosystem of the acequias. And the acequias, all the benefits that has already. They reduce the heat during summer. They conserve our soils. They reduce air pollution. They protect endangered species and charismatic species. They reduce flooding risk. And this is something very important. I will have to talk a little bit more later. Next. Well, the riparian areas represent the 2% of all the region. In New Mexico is this, but it's kind of a pattern that we can repeat in all the arid areas we are living on, but their impact in species is huge. So what can we do with all these things that we already know? Next. So what is the problem if we have an international treaty and all 3 federal, state, local government, everybody says the same? We want to preserve acequias in the valley. How's that? Next. Well, they are the problem and we are the problem, you know? So the government and the researchers, we are the problem. Why? Well, because we researchers honestly rarely share this information to the people, to the neighbors, to the farmers, to the acequia associations, etc. And the government think they are sometimes like the father of everything. And no. You don't understand this. Let me do this for you. I'm going to find the solution, the perfect solution with the experts. And the people is like, oh, really? How's that? Next. Well, who is doing New Mexico? Who's taking the main decisions in New Mexico? Well, honestly, the ACEQUIAS associations, they have a huge power in New Mexico. The people has a lot of power in New Mexico, and they sometimes have more power than desire for some people, but it's okay. I think it's nice that they have the power because at least they are preserving most of the acequias. They are trying to figure out how to do the things, and if you empower somebody, that person who has the water rights is going to try to do their best most of the times. Of course, everybody always you can find somebody who is not, but most of the times it's okay. And according to the New Mexico state law, you can get some irrigation rights after 5 years of demonstrating that you have been using the water for such purposes. And no legal documents are required. It's the common law, the roots of this. So it's really good, honestly. It's working. You can go to the farms and see. You can go to the cities in New Mexico and watch it. You know, it's just like, it's okay. It's, of course, it can be better. Yes, but it's okay. And next. Who's taking the decisions in Texas and Chihuahua? Well, that's a different story. That's not precisely the people. What is the basic difference? New Mexico relies into the private organizations, into the cities and everybody. And the federal government, states, local governments are limited by the water rights of the acequia users. In Texas, they try to follow the New Mexico path. Sometimes they are doing wrong, really wrong and bad stuff when the local and state governments try to reinvent the wheel. And then Chihuahua, honestly, blatantly, the law blatantly ignores acequia associations. And all governments say they want the control, but they do not want the responsibility of taking the control. Nice. So next. One of the differences is the civil law and the common law systems. No matter, New Mexico has a lot of civil law roots, and that's why they decide to codify a lot about acequias. The way the conflicts are solved are more rooted in common law. Texas relies purely in common law, and cases are solved most of the times going to the court. And in Mexico, in this case, to our states, we just have in theory the civil law system, but in practice, we have an informal common law in Juarez. Next. Well, this is New Mexico. We're going to just see rapidly about this. you can pass, you can see all the status, more status, please, more. We're not going to discuss the status. I'm just going to show you off all the status New Mexico has about acequias. It is just acequias, okay? More acequias, more acequias. How are, yeah, more acequias. Okay, well, as you can see, New Mexico has like a lot of status. Why? Because the roots of civil law of the Spaniard heritage made and make like a lot of things. But how this status work are not like the government, it's going to be in charge of everything. No, the status says you, ACEQUIAS association, if has a problem with that ACEQUIAS association, have to do this. Things like that, you know, have to solve the problem among all the associations and with people outside the associations, and how the associations are going to be considered associations, and how to file documents before the government and things. But it's not like, oh, I'm the government and I have these solutions for about everything. No, it's just like, it's more like a contract for me. It's more like a contract in which, an agreement in which is established how are you going to behave as an ACEQUIA association, and how are you going to take care of the ACEQUIA. In Texas is a different story. Let's see a little bit of Texas. Well, Texas had flooding issues when started ignoring ACEQUIAS. Yeah. This is one of the examples here in the ACEQUIAS in San Antonio. When they decide, you know, the population start growing, and they at the beginning of the 20th century, and the housing industry, and of course the roads made by the government, and deciding where it was going to be good to make the industries and the housing and everything, and the sewage system made by the government too, suddenly start to collide with the older system of ACEQUIAS. You know, it's just like, hey, what happened? Oh, it's just like, that's the old Mexican ACEQUIAS. I don't like that. We really trust in the experts, and we know how to do it. But you're flooding because you're not truly respecting the ACEQUIAS. Oh, we're flooding. Now we have to find a solution. And what was the solution? Well, at that time, let me tell you a little bit more about this. They were lamenting the newspapers. Oh, we are losing our heritage, we're ACEQUIAS, but this is so bad, etc. But it was really bad until it was almost everything ignored and reduced to nothing, because then the government tried to fix a problem they create. So due to bad planning of the government, they basically destroy all the ACEQUIAS within San Antonio, and then say, oh, well, now let's try to fix this or making something. It's like, oh my gosh. Well, next. What happened? Well, the San Antonio River Authority, because they know better than the people, they say, well, let's do something to protect the people, because the flooding has taken many lives and it has cost millions of dollars in property damages, and let's do something. And what is going to be the solution? Restore the ACEQUIAS? No, we're going to keep destroying the ACEQUIAS, and we're going to do our stuff. Really? So do you want to destroy that thing like an old building and do your building? Just like, really? Okay, so then the people who were still the users of the ACEQUIAS filed a lawsuit against the ACEQUIAS, against the, okay. So what is this? the court concluded that the people, the users of the acequia needed and were eligible for compensation damages caused by Sarah. So they did not even wanted to give them a compensatory damages to the users, which was beyond the imagination. And that was won by the users and during an appeal and a reversal. So next. The court also concluded that it was okay for Sarah to stay taking the property rights of the water who initially belonged to the people. And many obstacles passed by the years and everything. And I would like to show you what happened after this. Next. Well, 2011, really? Yes, that's true. 2011 finally was trying to restore the Acequia San Juan in San Antonio. It's just like a lot of people, a lot of time passed by. So do we really have to pass by? Next. And I'm going to skip this because I want to show you something else. In the state of Chihuahua, to learn this, we have to understand. Next. Well, Mexico is supposed to be a federation, but the state's supposed to have power. But in 1917, everybody remembers that because it's the start of the Marxist revolution, but it also was the year in which in the Mexican Constitution were included some socialist and communism theories there, including the severe restrictions to water. And water is now classified as national property, which means kind of romantically okay, but practically it's a huge problem. Next. Okay, what is the problem with this? There is no private property over water in Mexico regarding rivers. You can get a permit from the government to use a specific amount of water, but you are never a real owner of the water. So that government says everything about water. Next. We have some laws there, and the national water laws is the main law for this. And it tries to explain how to comply with this article 27 of the Constitution, but that law does not include the definition of acequia. They ignore the fact acequias exist. It's just like, oh, we don't care about that. But still, the federal government says that they want to retain some control, which is tricky. Next. The federal regulations say, well, the federal regulations is supposed to say how to comply with the law, but regulations do not define acequias neither. It's not even like in New Mexico that you have like tons of status. No, here it's not even a definition of acequia. So, but still, CONAGUA, through the Distritos de Riego, pretend to coordinate with the acequia associations about all the topics, excepting when it's an issue. Then suddenly, Distritos de Riego has no authority, and they know nothing. So that's why it's a chaos right now. Next. Chihuahua law say, well, oh, well, now we're going to take the control because the federal government is not taking the control about this. Let's take the control about water. Oh, but non-Chihuahua law talks about the acequias. They have a plan, they have a law, they have everything, but they are not talking about the acequias. They don't care. Next. So what's happening? So the municipal authorities are taking de facto the authority to regulate ACEQUIAS, which is atypical, it's beyond the civil law system, and they have a lot of plans and programs and structures. And now some of the federal courts are start taking the lead, saying that that it is legal, this, because if nobody's taking the case, and at least somebody's taking the case, well, they say, well, okay, it's yours, whatever. Next. But consistency. The lack of consistency is a huge problem because the municipality of Juarez does not have a city manager, and it changes every 3 years. So it's a chaos. And we need real authority for the ACEQUIAS Association, the farmers, the neighbors, the users, everybody. Next. Oh, ACEQUIAS in El Paso North Valley. Well, Mexicans, federal authorities have been avoiding a real resolution about if federal government has or not authority regarding ACEQUIAS. The Mexican federal courts has recently concluded that distritos de riego behave like governmental authority, and citizens can file amparos against them. And they say that the citizens have some rights over ACEQUIAS because there is a Mexican right in the Constitution for the right to a healthy environment. And it's the Article 4. Next. What suggestions do I have? It's just basically to recognize the riparian ecosystem of the ACEQUIAS and their uniqueness, especially in Mexico, because they are not recognized that way, and also in Texas in a way. Secure a better legal framework in better of ACEQUIA users, not only the farmers, but the neighbors, mainly in the Mexican side. And 3, restore ecosystem of ACEQUIAS located in El Paso al Norte to avoid a San Antonio flooding case, because that's going to happen. I know, sorry, I exceed 9 minutes, I think. Sorry.
That's okay. We've built in a little bit of buffer time with our midday break. So I believe we'll have time for, I'd say, like 1 question before we move on. And if there's anyone else who has questions too, you can, Denise, would you be able to kind of answer them in the chat if there's people who want to discuss a little bit further? Okay, let's see. Is there anybody, you can use the little hand raise function or just chime in if you have a question.
Thank you, Denise, for that dose of reality. Resilience is learning to accept reality. And my whole life, starting, my kids are born in Doña Ana County, New Mexico, has been involved with water since 1962. And I can agree with you. I can't agree with you more that the functions of ACEQUIAS, the irrigation canals, the laterals, all preserve the natural environment for recharging our aquifer. The problem I see is that upstream users in the Rio Grande part of the Rio Grande Bravo system want to put the water out to dry in huge reservoirs rather than following the dictates of the Convention of 1906 and the compact of the New Mexico, Colorado, Texas compact of 1938. We are supposed to deliver not brackish water, but fresh water to our neighbors in the Republic of Texas and the great nation of Mexico to use. And if we can deliver that water and operate our ACEQUIAS and not like the Chamizal concrete line canal or the many of the acequias. We need to allow those systems to be connected with the aquifer, so the water we deliver will recharge the aquifer. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. And like I said, if you have some additional questions, please feel free to use the chat function to continue our conversation. And right now, I will turn it over back to Alfredo to introduce our next session.
Bueno, pues muy buenos días a todos ustedes. Gracias por haber atendido la segunda sesión de nuestro congreso. Ahora nos toca hablar un poco sobre el agua para la agricultura y es para mí un gusto y un honor presentar a Ana Cristina García. Ana Cristina García es estudiante graduada de doctorado en la Universidad Estatal de Nuevo México y trabaja para el Instituto de Investigaciones de Recursos Hídricos en Nuevo México como una asistente de investigación. Su investigación explora estudios sobre hidrogeoquímica, calidad del agua, administración de recursos ambientales y el asunto del tema de la recarga, que es muy importante para la región y para los acuíferos. Previamente ella trabajaba en la Comisión Internacional de Límites y Aguas, de la sección mexicana, y también trabajó como profesora en la Universidad Autónoma de Ciudad Juárez y en el Instituto Tecnológico de Ciudad Juárez. Tiene una maestría en Ciencias en Ingeniería Ambiental por parte de la Universidad Autónoma de Ciudad Juárez y también una licenciatura en Ingeniería Química Ambiental por parte del Instituto Tecnológico de Parral, también ambas instituciones localizadas en México. De nuevo, agradecemos a Cristina su participación. Gracias, Cristina. Y ella irá conduciendo las diferentes participaciones como moderadora de esta mesa de agua para agricultura. Bienvenida, Cristina. Gracias por su participación. Adelante.
Muchas gracias, doctora Granados, por la introducción. Gracias a todos los participantes y a todos los presentadores que van a estar aquí en esta mesa. Primero vamos a empezar con el doctor Alejandro Bosque. El doctor Alejandro Bosque es director de la Facultad de Agronomía en la Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León y es presidente de la Asociación Mexicana de Educación Agrícola Superior. También es miembro cooptado del Comité Directivo de la Confederación Global de Asociados de Educación Superior en Ciencias Agrícolas y de la Vida. Genetista del Consejo Nacional de Recursos en Genéticos Pecuarios, CONAGREN, en México, y es evaluador genético de diferentes asociaciones mexicanas de criadores de razas especializadas de ganado vacuno. Tiene un doctorado en genética y mejoramiento animal de la Universidad de New England en Australia. Bienvenido, doctor.
Muchas gracias, Ana Cristina. Muy buenos días a todos. I will try to speak in English. It's my time to practice. And well, can I have the sharing of the screen, please?
Okay.
Okay, I have it. Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Good morning again, and thank you very much for inviting me to this Two Nations, One Water conference, especially to my colleague Alfredo Granados. That I'm being a geneticist. It's the first time I will talk in a subject that I don't really do not know much about it. But well, it's a challenge. I would like to acknowledge the contribution of Dr. Sergio Fernandez, Felix Gonzalez, and Juan Perales, who provided me with the most of the information that I will present, which I will give you their contacts if you have any specific questions. Alfredo asked me to talk about the water care that we have in the members schools of the Mexican Association of Higher Agricultural Education, which I currently preside. And as a sample, the action we do at the University of Nuevo León and its School of Agronomy that I represent as a dean with respect to water management. Well, the Mexican Association of Higher Education, we call it AMEAS, is a nonprofit civil association founded in 1971. Its members are all those institutions of higher agricultural education which teach undergraduates and postgraduate academic programs in agronomy, forestry, agribusiness, rural development, and animal sciences. Currently, we have 34 institutions who represent practically all the federal states of Mexico associated in AMEAS. Here we are in our School of Agronomy here in Nuevo León in October 2019 at this 78th AMEAS General Assembly with more than 150 members attended. AMEAS meet twice a year on topics such as senior management, strategic planning, balanced scorecard, organization development, curriculum design, training for self-evaluation for accreditation purposes, and awareness towards educational quality. As we said, we are members of the Global Confederation of Higher Education Association for Agriculture and Life Sciences, GHRA. After October, we continue having meetings or assemblies. The one was held in September 2020 in the University of Sonora, virtually. And another one was just this April in the Autonomous University of Chihuahua. And we will have our next assembly this November, the 71st. And in all assemblies, we have had more than 150 delegates participating. We hear when being the president of AMEAS, I joined the GHRA steering committee in Nanjing, China, just before the pandemic in October 2019, and where I met. Probably you know Doug Steele, which is the vice president of GHRA, but also he's vice president of the Association of Public and Land Grants Universities, AAPLU in the USA. And since then, we've been interacting especially in subjects towards agricultural education. And the AMEAS is well, we all schools of agronomy, and there is a government program called Faculty Professional Development Program of the Ministry of Public Education in Mexico, where there are more than 54 consolidated academic bodies of public universities that address issues related to the use and conservation of water. All of our partner schools include courses in their curricular plans on sustainable use and management of water. In this presentation, I will only refer to the case of the University of Nuevo León and its School of Agronomy. Our university was established in September 1933. We are celebrating 88 years just last Sunday. A total of 334 academic programs are offered at our 29 high schools, 26 higher education schools, and the Social Research Institute. Additionally, 32 of these programs are dual degree options that are taught in collaboration with other international prestigious universities. More than 214,000 students are currently enrolled in our academic programs in our high schools, undergraduates, and graduates levels. About 80,000 would be high school and the rest in higher education schools. These programs are attended under the advice of more than 70,000 lecturers or instructors. Nuevo León and neighborhood states are the main areas of coverage. The university has 6 campuses: the University City, which is the biggest one. Health sciences, Mederos, where the economics, art, and political sciences schools are. Agricultural sciences, where I am here near Monterrey, and Sabinas, Hidalgo, and Linares, which are extensions on some of those schools. All of our high school programs and 42 undergraduate programs are accredited, and 16 graduate programs hold international accreditation. So we are looking always for the quality of education in this university. In 2010, the Vice Presidency of Sustainability was created at the UNE, University of Nuevo León, to address problems in matters of sustainability at a national and international level. This Vice Presidency was to build a more equitable society with respect to the environment, incorporating principles and values which will guide us towards better practices with the student training. There are many tasks that this Vice Presidency does, creating networks of cooperation, training and update of human resources, promote social participation, training highly qualified humans resources, and so on. And also is very much concerned with the use of potential the potential of this institution to develop clean energy and its use. Earth Day, that is celebrated in April 22nd of every year. In this year, 2021, the School of Political Sciences and International Relations, located in Mederos campus, inaugurated a system of 124 photovoltaic panels that will help reduce the emission of carbon dioxide per year for about 15 tons. Also, this Vice Presidency has a Directorate of Infrastructure of Sustainability, and we have a program called UANL Conciencia, which now with the work together with the company Water and Drainage from Monterrey, Agua y Drenaje de Monterrey, we have 0 water leaks, and we could reduce in 2018 by about 30% of its consumption. Also, almost 90% of the green areas of the university city are being irrigated with treated wastewater. Also, drinking water purification stations were installed, in which feed fountains are distributed throughout the campus, thereby reducing the use of PET. So all of these are things that in certain form contribute to the environment. And also the University Council has approved technical guidelines for the use of drinking water and treated wastewater in all the schools and facilities. Forums are held with the students and employees to synthesize them to the sustainable use of water. As you can see in this graph, in the year 2019 to 2020, the water consumption in the university city was increased significantly compared to 2018. Simply changing the tap water in the laboratories to self-closing ones have significantly saved water in university facilities. Similar savings were registered in the Mederos campus, which is this graph. Although in February 2020, there was an extraordinary consumption of water due to the remodeling and constructions of buildings during that month. In our campus of agricultural science, where the School of Agronomy resides, savings were achieved almost every month in 2020 for this courses and conscious thoughts that we had. Also, the university has green groups about students, 50 independent organizations within the university, 27 federations, and every higher education school has its own green group. And they have the promotion, the participation of students to these groups and promotion also with videos at our university page. Now, I just will talk about the School of Agronomy and the aspects of water use, management, and conservation are of utmost importance for agricultural production. Excuse me. Of course, this also applies to the institution associated with the AMEAS. Our school has 3 academic units where courses are taught. The main one is here in near Monterrey, Escobedo, Nuevo León, which is the campus of agricultural science, and northeast is Marine, about 25 kilometers northeast of the campus, the main campus, and La Ascensión, which is here in the south of Nuevo León, about 350 kilometers. We also have 2 other experimental field stations, that is San Jose and Los Ramones in those counties. You can see in the graph, we have 4 educational programs in the bachelor degree, agribusiness, all engineering, in agronomy, agribusiness, biotechnology, and food sciences. As you can see, well, for the last 10 years, they increase in enrollments about double. The same in the postgraduate programs in agriculture and livestock sciences. And we also have a new master degree in science in biosystem engineering and food industry engineering. And also in the postgraduate in the last 10 years, the enrollment doubled. So we have about 1,600 students altogether right now. And the University School of Agronomy has 2 academic bodies. One is in consolidation, another one consolidated in relation to sustainable use of water. These academic bodies are recognized by the Faculty Professional Development Program of the Ministry of Education. These programs are the Academic Body of Water, Soil, and Environment Sciences, and the other one is Academic Body of Environment and Sustainability. We have a laboratory of environmental remediation and analysis of soils, plants, and waste and water, and they support the courses or learning units of environmental microbiology, bioremediation, wastewater treatment system, sampling and quantitative analysis, analysis of heavy metals in food, and water sampling and analysis. Here are some recent publications regarding the treatment and use of wastewater for agricultural use by our faculty members. Also, they have written books and book chapters. These are just a sample of them. Now, in this image, you can see the wastewater treatment ponds fed by the city of Marin at the Marine Academic Unit, where some of the experiments are carried out. You can see the La Juventud Dam, which is in this part, and other also belonging to the academic unit of Marine, and other facilities to house crops and domestic animals, which are all these. We have all sort of animals, dairy cows, beef cows, goats, sheep, pigs, and everything, all for research and development of the students. The ponds were built about 15 years ago. So these are some of the pictures that they were when they were building them. This is the schematic representation of the hybrid wastewater treatment system in Marin using rubber tire chips. The management of this system is in charge of Dr. Juan Antonio Vidales Contreras. In case anyone has questions about this system, I will ask you to contact Dr. Vidales, and shortly I will give you his email and contact information. Also in the agronomy school, research work has been carried out in our plant factory technology, which contributes to the substantial saving of water in agricultural crops, mainly leaf crops. For example, a baby lettuce with this technology consumes 400 millimeters of water in 22 days that it lasts its cultivation time. While in the same period of time, the same lettuce would consume 40 liters of water in the open field. We are proposing this technology to the Zero Hunger Project in Nuevo León, which is the second Sustainable Development Goal of the United Nations. In the academic unit of La Ascensión, which is south of the state, water is also used and managed for different crops and animal species that are used by students in research and development, such as alfalfa, wheat, oats, goats, sheep, and other domestic species. As you can see, there is garlic cultivation, and greenhouse products like tomatoes also are produced, and potatoes and other sunflower for feeding stock, and remolachas, also chilacayote, which translation I don't know in English, but well, all are students, and there are they practice well when we were not in pandemic time. In this time they do it, but with precautions. The School of Agronomy also has an internal service of green areas for the different campuses and sport units of the University of Nuevo León, where students, technicians, and field personnel participate using treated wastewater. So here are some of the pictures. And well, I hope I feel the expectation of Alfredo, because he asked me to talk about this topic. But I can conclude that all our schools in the AMEAS, in a way, they do have the same subject matters in their curricular plans. And they do, of course, work with water to raise animals and crops. So we are very concerned for the conservation and use of water. So I would like to acknowledge, as I said at the beginning, of Dr. Sergio Fernandez, Felix Gonzalez, and Juan Antonio Vidales for providing me with this information about the use and management of water at the UANL. And well, I hope you don't ask me hard questions, but I am available to answer. And the thing is to have this participation for you to see that the AMEAS, we have all these schools that we all deal with water, and it's a problem in agriculture, especially in states like Chihuahua or like Nuevo León, Texas, especially Nuevo León, that is semi-arid, not much rain, and we have to take care of that amount of water that we have. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Alejandro del Bosque, for this presentation. So I don't know if someone have any question or commentaries. Okay, so we will continue with the tags, and at the end, we will give time for questions or commentaries to all speakers. So we will continue with the presentation of Robert Sabie. He has been at the New Mexico Water Research Institute since 2014. He's currently a research scientist, and his research is focused on using remote sensing technology for water resource management, particularly optical remote sensing for measuring evapotranspiration. Robert Sabie is working towards completing his PhD in water science and management at New Mexico State University. He earned a Master of Applied Geography at the New Mexico State University and a Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Policy and Planning at Western Washington University. Welcome, Bob.
All right, thank you. See. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to talk about New Mexico Water Resources Research Institute research efforts in water and agriculture. So the way I'm going to do my presentation today is I'm going to provide more of an overview of the different varieties of projects that we're working on. This is not an exhaustive list of projects, but really just to try to demonstrate, the different types of projects we have going on at the Institute. And I'm not really going to go into a lot of detail on any of these projects. Most of the content of this presentation was provided by my colleagues and collaborators, which I'm grateful for. So first, I want to just talk about a little about water and agriculture in New Mexico, as much as I can do in one slide. The agriculture in New Mexico generally occurs along the river corridors, and so we kind of see these green ribbons of agriculture, and then also on the western or eastern part of the state, where you have a lot of center pivot agriculture that's reliant on groundwater from the Ogallala or High Plains Aquifer. In New Mexico in 2015, the state used about 3.1 million acre feet of water, or for reference, it's about 3.8 billion cubic meters. And the source of that water comes from surface water from the headwaters of up in Colorado and northern New Mexico, and then groundwater, our aquifers, and that's about 52% surface water and 48% groundwater. Of that, about 76% in the state is used for irrigated agriculture, and a similar split between about 53% and 47% surface water to groundwater. So next I want to kind of focus on Doñana County in southern New Mexico because of the shared border with Texas and Mexico, and because of the agriculture that we have down here. In 2015, we used about 382,000 acre feet of water, a little bit different than the rest of the state, where we used about 87% of that went to irrigated agriculture. And also different is the split between surface water and groundwater, where we used about 59% groundwater. And of course, that can vary by year, depending on how much water we have coming down from Colorado and northern New Mexico. The total estimated acreage, irrigated acreage in 2015 was about 72,000 acres. That's made up, the crop makeup of that is primarily alfalfa, cotton, chili, and then the dominant crop in Doñana County is pecans, which is, in 2018 was about 31,500 acres, and that continues to grow. And so at the Institute, we have a wide variety of projects, and we try to pull from a wide range of expertise in academia. And our projects range from having a very heavy emphasis on social sciences to a heavy emphasis on physical sciences, and then most of the projects try to fall somewhere in between, where we're incorporating both social science and and physical science. And this project, the first project I'm going to describe a little bit is strategic following for sustainable water and thriving agriculture. And this project is funded by the Thornburg Foundation and is in response to a recent effort by the Interstate Stream Commission to use fallowing as a technique for water conservation. This pilot program is currently underway, and of course, if you're taking land out of agricultural production and not applying water, then you're going to not use as much water. But one thing that's not really known and we're investigating on this project is what are the impacts, the social and economic impacts from doing something like this, and how does it affect the local community in a long-term sense. And so this project is conducting a deep analysis of the social, political, and economic background and trying to understand the behavioral structures that contribute to the depletion of the water resources. And so hopefully by working directly with the community and the agricultural stakeholders, we're going to be able to understand a little bit about how a program like this might impact their livelihoods and the sustainability of agriculture and water in the valley. And we're also hopeful that we have another request for funding to continue this work to include the information from this project into a stakeholder-driven decision support tool. The next project, this kind of touches a little bit on the first presentation of the day, where this work is being conducted up in northern New Mexico in one of the ACEQUIAS valleys. And this project is in response to the need to come up with some adaptive capacity strategies as the temperatures keep increasing during the winter. And so we're seeing a lot less winter precipitation, which makes it so that we're not getting as much snow, and so we're getting earlier runoffs from the headwaters, and the growing season is actually extending a little bit as well. And so the researchers went directly to the community and started meeting with them at their community meetings and trying to understand the need for additional data and what that would look like for them. And so the objective of this project is to assess the role of improved data accessibility on adaptive capacity. And so the researchers installed stream monitoring gauges and some other instruments and set that up on telemetry. And then they co-developed with the community an interface of how to access the data in real time via a website. And so this project is funded by appropriations from the state of New Mexico. And it was there was a pre-test and post-test survey to really understand how effective this project is at helping them increase their adaptive capacity. And this is just a screenshot of the monitoring web interface that shows some of the data that are being accessed by the community. But in general, there seemed to be a positive response from the community, where most of the participants that took the survey indicated that they were able to make better management decisions with access to these data. The next project I'm going to talk about, this project is funded by the Usgs Tap Program. And so most of you are probably familiar with that, the Transboundary Aquifer Assessment Program. If you were here yesterday or just at this meeting in general, I think most people have a general knowledge of that program. But this project is using remote sensing to develop ET fluxes for the Mesilla Valley. And so we've got a couple eddy covariance towers set up. And first the alfalfa, we had a eddy covariance tower set up there for several years, and also had the field heavily measured, where we had a lot of instruments set up for surface water inflow, and we had some soil moisture profiles, and we're able to get a really good water budget calculation from that. Since then, we've that field's been converted into a pecan orchard, and so we installed another eddy covariance tower to measure how evapotranspiration changes over time as pecans go from a young orchard to a more mature orchard. And so this is important as you know, the increase in acreage in the Mesilla Valley continues to go up, and so we're really wanting to know if we're able to calculate the evapotranspiration a lot better. This can go into some of the groundwater modeling efforts that are going on. Kind of similar to the first project that I talked about, this project takes an eddy covariance tower and some other instrumentation and puts it into a fallow field. And so, you know, this is also again in response to the, you know, needing to know a little bit more about what's going on in these fallow fields as that becomes more of a prevalent management strategy for conserving water. But there's not a lot of research that's been done on placing eddy covariance towers inside a fallow field, because I guess the assumption is that, you know, if you're not putting a lot of irrigation on there, you're not losing a lot of water through evapotranspiration. But this is just kind of a study that's going to measure those hydrologic processes on the fallow farm fields. And I mean, even here, this picture is taken when there wasn't a lot of precipitation, but you can still see there's plants that are popping up and using water. So this will give us a better understanding of that. So next project I'm going to discuss is a comparison of water movement and flood and drip irrigated pecan fields. And so as the pecan acreage increases, there's more interest in using different irrigation technologies. So typically in Mesilla Valley, flood irrigation is used for most things. But you know, there's a lot of effort and interest in using drip irrigation. And so this project has a study plot at the Leindecker Plant Science Center and has some soil moisture profiles installed. The field setup where there's 70% drip irrigation and 30% flood irrigation. And so this project is doing a comparison to try to see how these different irrigation techniques are impacting the water budget. And so if we have more information on that, we might be able to do some projections on what it would look like if certain percentages of the valley switched to drip irrigation versus flood irrigation, or also, you know, since we're using both groundwater and surface water, what it would look like if we kind of had a hybrid system where we were able to use surface water for flood irrigation, and that would help, you know, recharge the aquifer. But if we were using groundwater, maybe we could use that for the drip irrigation. So some of the research that I'm more involved in, I do remote sensing, and I'm interested in looking at the spatial variability of evapotranspiration across the valley. There's a lot of different remote sensing products already available. And when I say that, I'm talking about satellite remote sensing. But each of these products kind of have their own nuances as to how useful they are. Some of them work better in agricultural areas, but don't work very well in the rangelands, or vice versa. And so, and some of them require a lot of data in order to be able to work. And some of them are simplified, but are not really, they're more general models, and they're not really good at showing the spatial variability at the field scale. And so one thing that I'm interested in is looking at optical remote sensing and using vegetation indices. And this has been done before, where you take different spectral wavelengths on the satellite and you create vegetation indices and then relate that to the evapotranspiration, either measured through different ground measurements. There's a lot of crop coefficients that have already been published that kind of do this, but these crop coefficients are developed, you know, in very small plots And they're the most famous ones are the FAO 56 report, and they were developed in Idaho and California, but a lot of those might not necessarily capture the local conditions and how things grow in the Mesilla Valley. So having a vegetation index that is directly responsive to the changes in vegetation at the field scale might be useful for making management decisions. Also, typically the most commonly used vegetation index for this is the normalized difference vegetation index, or NDVI. But that index is widely used, but it has some downfalls where it saturates at a certain point. And so when you get really green fields, which might be transpiring a lot of water, you don't get any response in the vegetation index. So there's a lot of other different indices that we might be able to use. And so I've got 8 different indices that I'm trying right now to see which ones might work better for calculating a crop coefficient for alfalfa. And of course, when you're doing studies where you're using data that's collected, 400 miles above the surface of the earth, there's a lot going on between the sensor and the surface. And so the R-square values end up being a little bit lower than what you would see if you're doing a field studying and having a handheld radiometer right above the plants. But the preliminary results that I'm getting, if you look at the graph on the right, show that there's a pretty good relationship and agreement between the ET calculated from using a modified soil adjusted index versus the ET measured at a flux tower. The biggest changes seem to occur during the periods where they're doing cuts. So another project I'm working on, and this is kind of building off of the other project with using remote sensing, is the last 5-10 years there's been a huge interest in using remote sensing from aerial platforms, either a crewed aircraft or a drone or uncrewed aerial vehicle. So as this technology is advanced, I've seen a lot of talk about and discussion and papers on, just putting the sensors on the airplane or on the drone, but I haven't seen as much attention paid to the calibration. And so there's lots of effort that need to go into doing these calibrations. And for instance, Landsat 9 was just launched on Monday. That's another Earth observing satellite, and they have crews of scientists that spend their career coming up with the calibrations on making useful data from those sensors. But we have sensors on airplanes that I can say it's a pretty big challenge to to do the calibration on these. And so I'm wondering, what difference does it make if we spend a bunch of effort on the calibration using some painted masonite panels versus these calibrated reflectance targets, or doing lab calibrations with an integrating sphere, and doing the different levels of calibration, and then running vegetation index based crop coefficients and seeing how much of a difference that makes compared to measured evapotranspiration. And just to kind of highlight some of the issues that you might run into is this bottom left graph is showing the radial fall off from the center pixel of a camera. And so each of these dots represents a pixel on the camera. And as you move away from the center pixel, you get, towards the edge, you can get anywhere up to a 30% fall off, and difference in measurement, even with a constant light source. So, to calibrate that, you need a flat field correction. And then this other graph here is just showing the difference in slope between calibrated reflectance targets versus a masonite panel. So question still remains as to whether that makes a huge difference once you run the vegetation indexes or indices through there, but that's something I'm still working on. The last project I want to mention is work that Dr. Samani is doing. And I mean, he's got a lot of different projects, but this one is one of his more recent projects, and it's looking at climate data and the growing season of pecans in the Mesilla Valley or Lower Rio Grande Valley. And what I found interesting about this is, what they found is that between 1901 and 1950, there was a, was it a 70 or yeah, 29-day decrease in the duration of the growing season. But then from 1950 until 2019, there was a 70-day increase in the growing season. And so what this translates to is increase in about 180 millimeters per year of reference ET and 124 millimeters per year increase in actual evapotranspiration. And so, this has implications for the health of the pecan industry and how much water is being used. So pretty interesting results from that. So today I provided just a general overview of several of the different projects that the Water Resources Research Institute's involved in with water and agriculture. Of course, again, this isn't an exhausted list. I'm sure there's some of our collaborators that I left out that are on the meeting today. So our projects pull from a wide range of academic disciplines. Our team, we have a great research team at the Institute where we have, social scientists, we have people that have backgrounds in architecture and civil engineering. And so we have a lot of fun with our projects. I think that also helps with the success of our projects is just having a really fun team to work with. Our projects leverage the expertise of the NMSU agricultural science centers and extension specialists. And so, a lot of these projects would not be able to complete without all the help that we get from our extension folks and our experts with the specific crops. So I really appreciate all the help that we get from them. And they're always really excited to work on new projects with us. And then I want to point out that we also do specific efforts, including both social and hydrologic systems through co-developing our new projects. And so I know this was mentioned yesterday, but we're really trying to bring in, the stakeholder and co-developing parts of these projects towards the very beginning of the projects, rather than delivering information at the very end and having that be our stakeholder engagement. And we believe that, or at least I believe that this gives us a better chance at getting adoption of some of these research projects and the information that we're coming up with. And so really trying hard on the social hydrological systems. And with that, I think that's all I have for today. Thank you, gracias. And if there's any questions, I'm gonna go ahead and stop presenting.
Thank you, Bob, for this presentation. Now it is Josiah Heyman's turn. I hope I pronounce well your name. Josiah Heyman is Professor of Anthropology, endowed Professor of Border Trade Issues, and Director of UTEP's Center for Inter-American and Border Studies. His research has been funded by the National Science Foundation, National Institute of Health, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Harry Frank Guggenheim Foundation, and many others. He is the author or editor of 5 scholarly books and over 140 scholarly articles and chapters. He is currently interested in transboundary water management, the impact of water transitions on the poor and vulnerable, and health risk of poor and vulnerable Hispanics. So it's your turn. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who's here. I appreciate the organizers and the attendees and my collaborators, some of whom are here. Let me see if I can succeed at sharing my screen. And it would be, let's see if it's this one. Yes. So I want to talk based on work that I've done on the USDA project, Sustainable Water Resources for Irrigated Agriculture in a Desert River Basin. And there are many, many people who worked on that project. I was the co-PI with Bill Hargrove. There were people at a number of universities in the region, a number of people who are in this meeting. Special acknowledgement to Alfredo Granados, who was really a tremendously valuable collaborator in all regards, and in particular concerning the Mexican side of the border. Let me go back. And involving these institutions, so recognition and thanks to all of them. Okay. Strangely behaved PowerPoint, of course, because PowerPoint is the world's worst piece of software. So the area I'm going to be talking to, and we've had some introduction to it already, is the section of the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo River from Elephant Butte Reservoir to where the Conchos joins it, and especially the irrigated section of the river down to about Fort Quitman. I'll apologize right immediately now for using the North American words for these geographical features. So for the aquifers and for the river, the Rio Grande rather than Rio Bravo, and for using English units like acre feet rather than a million cubic meters and so forth, simply for simplicity's sake, and not to have to try to jump back and forth between all of those things. Although I will say that Conejo de Médanos is perhaps one of the most amusingly named geographic features in the world. It's fundamental to understand that this region's water, the vast majority of it, doesn't come down from the sky, but rather it's an input from outside the region, from north of the region via the Rio Grande stream flow. And that climate change is decreasing the outflow from the snowpack in southern Colorado and far northern New Mexico. For reasons that would take a different presentation to understand why climate change would decrease the outflow from the snowpack. And so here, courtesy of Dave Gutzler, recently retired climatologist at University of New Mexico, are four of the downscaled global climate change scenarios to show you that we've considered a number of scenarios from the very wet to the somewhat dry. And if you draw a line approximately halfway through those, you will see that virtually all of them except the very wet are most of the time below the previous experience scenarios. So to give you a sense of what that implies, we have a very dry scenario on the left here, which shows you the inflow into the region. The San Marcial gauge is a measurement of the inflow into the region. The Caballo release, that is the release out into the use of the region, and the reservoir storage. And we can see that very dry scenario, it's always below full allocation. In a middle scenario, which I think is one that's a useful one to think about because it's the middle of the ensemble, the middle of the spaghetti diagram, we can see that over time it's trending to be below the full allocation. And then once again, to just show that you can consider You know, if you think you're always going to roll double sixes with the dice, you can, you know, put your faith on the wet scenario on the right-hand side. So these surface shortfalls propagate to groundwater use via conjunctive, replacing that surface water shortfall via conjunctive use of groundwater. So for example, to take an example, which is we've seen already is heavily irrigated and is rapidly growing pecans in this region are irrigated at approximately 5 acre-feet. In a full allocation year, there's going to be approximately 3 acre-feet allocated to irrigators. There are complicated strategies for making that up. So there's actually some complexity to this that I'm not going to try to tackle now, and I'm not sure we have the full set of data. A lot of people have fields that they get water for, but they actually, like fields of cotton, that they simply shift their water onto the pecans. So it's already in deficit versus a 5 acre-foot demand. 3 or 4 is below 5. And also note that that isn't just the pecans use the most water, but pecans are expanding, they're spreading, as Bob Sabie said before. If there's a surface water shortfall, then it's made up with groundwater. If there's more of a surface water shortfall, then there's even more use of groundwater. Now, it's true that when the river channel is full, there's some seepage from the river channel into the aquifer. Likewise, there's infiltration from flood irrigation. But I really want to emphasize that the infiltration from the river and from flood irrigation is not a perpetual motion machine. It's important to remember the goal of irrigated agriculture is the evapotranspiration, the beneficial use or consumptive use. And 60 to 70% of the water goes up from the plants. I mean, that's the whole point. The point is to use up the water in growing pecans. Okay. So about 20 to 30% of the water infiltrates, but only some of that is we need to now think of a very important point. There's new water to the region. Of course, no water is ultimately new, but there's a new addition to the region, which is the water that comes through Elephant Butte and then is allocated to irrigation. The infiltration down back into the groundwater is a new addition to the aquifer from the upstream river supply. The use of groundwater that infiltrates back is not a new addition to the region. It's return flow back to the aquifer, or, and I'll say in a minute, I think actually more like spread out in the system in a whole bunch of different ways. So as climate leads to the river declining, more and more of the water is return flow, not new net additions, not new net recharge. And that's because there's less coming in from north of the region and more is return flow of groundwater. The infiltrating water, both the return of groundwater and the recharge from the river moves, it moves laterally as well as downward. It picks up salt and other contaminants. It moves to other root zones. So it's not entirely exactly replacing existing fresh groundwater. So what we see in the region quite clearly, and I'll show some evidence in a minute, is a gradual decrease in fresh groundwater. Agricultural pumping in this conjunctive use situation, even with some infiltration, leads to a gradual net withdrawal. Not large amounts all at once, but we're now talking about phenomena, we're talking about processes that have in the past lasted for decades and into the future will last for decades. Urban pumping, even though my focus here is on agriculture, they're pumping groundwater that agriculture also uses. Urban pumping is a steady drain on the fresh portion of aquifers. There's more urban pumping in the Hueco Zone than in the Mesilla, but it impacts both. Ciudad Juarez, El Paso, very large cities pump heavily from the Hueco Zone, but they both pump somewhat from the Mesilla. Las Cruces pumps from the Mesilla. There are urban programs for artificial recharge. Those things are very valuable initiatives, but they're only a fraction of what is withdrawn. Once again, there's no perpetual motion machine. The vast majority of the water is lost to evaporation. And we can see this gradual decrease in fresh groundwater in the record of monitoring wells. I'm going to talk first about the Mesilla, and I'm not going to try to be too technical, but if we look at the first transect on that map, the northernmost transect, the Las Cruces section, you can see monitoring wells, and you can look very easily, visual inspection, see that they are declining over time. If you look at the second transect, the mid-Mesilla transect, once again, you can see monitoring wells. They go up and down quite dramatically with the influx of new infiltration from pumped groundwater and incoming surface water. But the trend is what we're looking at, and the trend is clearly going down. Likewise, the Canutillo section, once again, we can see the trend going down. In the Hueco Zone, we have a excellent long-term monitoring well, 1964 to near the present, and it's going down, slowing its decrease, but going down without question over the last 50 years. So once again, to put together these climate scenarios with what's happening in the groundwater, as we look at the groundwater, we see a long-term decline. These are diagrams of depletion, cumulative change in storage, where the line across the black line near the top is zero change in storage, and we see decreases in storage, both driven by urban and agricultural extraction, and even allowing for recharge. The net direction is decrease in storage. So, are we running out of groundwater? Are we running out of groundwater? The answer is no. I'm going to bracket for the moment how much fresh groundwater is left. The reasonable estimates of the fresh groundwater versus the demand is within a human lifespan for both. The Hueco Zone sooner, and we have very, much better estimates of the volume in the Hueco Zone. We're talking about 30 years, maybe 30 to 45 years. On the Mesilla, the estimates of the groundwater, we also have estimates of groundwater there, thanks to John Hawley. And it also, it's larger, but it's going down. But, and this is the important but, there's a large volume of brackish groundwater remaining in both. What we face instead of running out of groundwater is a transition in the next few decades from near surface, fresh groundwater. Both of those terms are relevant. They're near the surface, they're relatively inexpensive to pump, and they're relatively fresh, not salty, to deeper or laterally intruding brackish groundwater. So what's involved in this transition? The desalination of brackish water, the disposal of concentrates. On the one hand, agriculture doesn't necessarily need quite as purified water as urban consumption. On the other hand, urban systems can have large concentrated desalination, whereas agriculture has dispersed desalination, and so you get this infrastructure problem of bringing together the concentrates. Small amounts of concentrates can be disposed of in let me admit, a somewhat sloppy surface way, but you don't want to do that in large volumes for the agricultural demand of the region, for example, simply going to poison the region. Or stopping use of water on, except for purely the unpredictable river water. I mean, some years you're going to have enough river water to keep your plants alive. Other years, you certainly wouldn't have enough river water to keep your plants alive. If you're investing in perennials like pecan trees, you need to keep them alive every year. This sort of strategy of only farming when there's river water is probably not sustainable either from an enterprise point of view or from a perennial crop point of view. Desalination means costlier water. That implies new business models, and in particular in agriculture, urban demand generates enough price for that water that the urban side can pay for increasingly costly water. Now, I currently am looking into the impact of that on vulnerable people, on poor people in the urban system, but the urban system as a whole will pay for new water. However, that's going to be much more of a challenge for agriculture. During the transition period, there's going to be stresses and uncertainties. There's going to be the cost of drilling deeper, pumping up higher. You're going to have uneven patches of remaining fresh water as you get close to the interface between the brackish water and the fresh water. It's going to be uneven and uncertain. There are impacts which we don't really understand at this point, very much need to have attention. Smaller, less capitalized, more, let's say, vulnerable to impact, smaller farmers versus larger farmers. Other variables I may not even be conceptualizing. There's going to be an impact of this transition on farm and farm business employment. So transition is a crucial concept I'd like you to take away from this talk. The costs of new water, of alternative supplies are out there. We will, there's a long history of running out of the easiest and cheapest sources of things and then moving into new sources, new resources, new technologies. The classic example of that is, and very tragically, but wiping out whales and then switching over to drilling for rock oil, petroleum. But we're gonna transition to new sources, but those new sources are going to be punitively much more expensive. And this is from El Paso Water. So this is an urban scenario. It's not exactly the same for agriculture. As I mentioned, desalination for agriculture has advantages, not needing to be as pure, and disadvantages being very dispersed. But it gives you some sort of sense. I mean, groundwater, fresh groundwater is 3 times cheaper than desalination. And fresh groundwater is something on the order of 15 times cheaper than long distance importation. So I'd like to thank everybody. If anybody has any questions, I would certainly welcome them. And once again, thank you to all of my collaborators. I'm at fault for what I say that's wrong, but they're the ones who deserve the credit. Thank you.
I would like to ask the audience if anyone has questions or comments for our speakers. Si alguien tiene alguna pregunta, algún comentario para nuestros presentadores, creo que este es el momento.
Si me permites.
Claro que sí, adelante.
Gracias. La pregunta es para el doctor Alejandro del Bosque. En su presentación se refirió y puso como ejemplo lo que en Marín, en el campus, tiene para lo que es el tratamiento de aguas residuales, tanto en lo que es una serie de lagos como en sí el tratamiento como parte de tecnología. Mi pregunta es si algunos de estos proyectos, más que dentro del campus, se han estado llevando a cabo con la Junta de Aguas, en el caso de Monterrey, Nuevo León, o con alguna de los industriales, dado que a nivel de todo México, ahí es en donde se encuentra instalada la industria, digamos, de mayor peso. Y además aprovecho para felicitar a todos mis amigos que acaban de presentar, Dr. Heyman, Bob, y desde luego un nuevo amigo, el doctor Alejandro del Bosque. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. Bueno, como yo confesé al principio, no soy el dueño de esas tecnologías. Sí, me toca dirigir los esfuerzos que hacen nuestros profesores. Sé que el doctor Vidales, que es el principal investigador, él es investigador nacional aquí en el SNI de CONACYT, junto con sus compañeros del Cuerpo Académico Consolidado de Ambiente y Sustentabilidad. Ya tienen más de 10 años trabajando en esto. Sé que pues más que todo lo hacen para la cuestión agrícola de nuestros campus. No sé si ya haya trascendido algunas de sus, vamos a decir, tecnologías que han implementado en remediar suelos y agua residual en términos de la industria como usted me lo está planteando. Disculpe, pero sí me confieso un poquito de poco conocimiento de la aplicación, pero con todo gusto por ahí puse el contacto con el doctor Vidales, Juan Antonio Vidales, quien lo haría. Si le digo cosas yo, pues estaría mintiendo. Mejor prefiero que ellos lo contesten, pero les agradezco mucho su buena opinión. Gracias.
Gracias.
I'm thinking also that we need to understand, since we're a transboundary conference in a transboundary region, understand some of the questions I was raising, these questions of transition, which, are going to be hydrologically different in different cuencas in Mexico, but are going to affect northern Mexico in one way or another. And I think we need to try to understand those also in terms of the Mexican reality. Some things that come to my mind, on the one hand, there's been a good bit of agricultural desalination investment already for agriculture in the northwest of Mexico, for example, in Baja California Norte, in San Quintin. That I don't fully know how heavily subsidized that was. That in general, desalination is an expensive technology in terms of upfront capital costs and also in terms of the disposal of concentrates, although at the ocean, it becomes more possible to do that. I would say, once again, in Mexico, we have an even wider range of differences between small farmers and large farmers. And there's going to be a question of the different sectors, the impact of this transition, the cost structure, and so forth, the access on different sectors. And although this is an agricultural session today, I would make the same point about what is facing urban water supply systems. In general, I think that we are seeing the same phenomena in both countries. There's a somewhat different social structure in the two countries, but in a different political, administrative structures. But nevertheless, we're all going to face this transition, and we need to start to think about how we navigate it.
And may I, unless someone else has just one very quick to Dr. Heyman.
Yes, please.
Yes, you just wrote some very important topic. As I'm going, in this case, with the treatment of brackish water along the border. You mentioned over there San Quintin, etc. And of course, during your talk in this area, there's the desal plant here at the K. Hutchinson desal plant, which is for direct already toward the distribution system of the Paso water utilities. But as I understand, and this has been for decades already, on the allocation that is from the Rio Colorado toward the Mexicali Valley and at the end, a good amount toward the Sea of Cortez or Gulf of California, because upstream, all of those states use that Colorado River for irrigation, and then is drainage, which is already, with drainage, it's a lot of salts. My understanding is that just before it really it is sent toward the Mexicali Valley, there is a treatment desal plant so that the high concentration of salts that is already in the river, it actually gets to Mexicali and Yaván, accordingly, not only to the quantity, but to the quality. And I think that that's some information that will be good to have as a reference, and something in which IBWC, taking into what Doctora Marilena Giner referred yesterday into actions. I think those are case studies as such. And then on the other way, coming from first comes from the Santa Cruz River, down to Nogales, and then comes up with actually the city of Nogales residual water, but then it's treated and then it goes into the Santa Cruz River. So there are those examples that I think is important to have as a reference into this initiative or this strategy that the Binational Conference is having. Thank you.
Right, I think that Carlos raises some very important points. We have these little bridgeheads of transboundary cooperation, specifically around water quality, including salinity. And there's not a groundwater, there's not directly a concrete operational groundwater management minute between the United States and Mexico. There's general sentiments that the CILA, IBWC have agreed that would be good to do a better job of managing transboundary groundwater. But what we do have are these little points which show that when the two countries need to solve a specific problem with a specific regional constituency, where, for example, the reason there's desalination in the lower Colorado is that the United States was delivering water that was almost toxically salty to Mexico. And so there was an agreement that the United States had to make the effort to two things: to treat water coming down the Colorado to reduce the salinity, and also to not pump within a certain distance of the river, so as to not draw away water, so that what was left was the most concentrated water right in the surface channel. And so I think those are examples that we can look to for other places like the Paso del Norte region. I think that the United States and Mexico, like many neighbors in the world and many countries that share water, learn to cooperate when they have to. And this transition is going to make us learn to cooperate. I hope, I fondly wish, all my years of working jointly with Mexico, that would make me very happy if I saw that happening.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And I would like to thank all the speakers for honoring us with their presence at the session, Water and Agriculture in the Chihuahua, New Mexico, and Texas region. We really appreciate it. Gracias a todos por sus enriquecedoras pláticas, porque creo que este es un tema muy importante muy importante y clave para mantener la sustentabilidad de los acuíferos entre esta región de Chihuahua, Nuevo México y Texas. Gracias a todos. Ahora los dejo con Mark.
Hey, thank you so much, Ana. So we have pretty much arrived right on time to our first scheduled break before our afternoon session begins at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. Just to let you know, right before that session begins, we'll be doing our first giveaway prize drawing of the conference today for a set of these postcards, as well as one of these prints here that you see, these lithograph mid-19th century prints. So show up for our afternoon session and you can have a chance to win one of these two prizes. And then later as well, before our conference proceedings end around 2:30, we'll do another presentation, followed by a networking hour that will provide you some more information about later today once that time comes. So please feel free to get up, stretch, grab a bite to eat, and we will see you later. Okay, I'll take a quick moment to introduce our next session, but before we do that, I mentioned that there would be some giveaway prize drawings before we began our afternoon session. So I'd like to let for our postcards of the Acequia Madre de Ciudad Juarez, today's winner is Dana Saucedo. So congratulations, Dana. I'll be following up to get some postal information so that we can send you these prints once we have them available. And for one of our lithograph reproductions, we have Ronda Diaz is the winner of that, of one of these. So I'll be following up with both of you. There'll be a chance tomorrow as well, and at the end of our conference session today to win some more prizes and things like that. But now I'd like to move things along to our afternoon session titled Water for the Future. And I'd like to do that by introducing the first of our presenters, Sam Fernald. Sam is the director of the New Mexico Water Resources Research Institute, as well as a professor of watershed management at New Mexico State University. He's primarily interested in applied research that makes a difference for thriving communities and healthy ecosystems. So Sam, I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Well, good afternoon. Buenas tardes a todos. I'll be talking about managing water budgets for future resilience in the Mesilla Conejos Melanos region, particularly in New Mexico. Our other speakers will talk about other parts of the Paso del Norte, Texas, New Mexico, Chihuahua region. And I was provided slides by Dr. Connie Maxwell, who's our Water and Community Collaboration Lab leader at the New Mexico Water Resources Research Institute. Also Jorge Preciado, a graduate research assistant. Kevin Perez, technical specialist, and Ashley Atkins, research scientist. We have other efforts going on. And this is actually a draft of the slides that have been thrown together to start to give an idea of what we're doing in the lower Rio Grande of New Mexico. So I'll talk first about water budgets, and then I'll talk about just a selection of some of the ways we're looking at water for the future. And you'll see here on the bottom, this is a picture of the New Mexico Water Resources Research Institute. We support water research for improved water management. And we're one of the USGS supported National Institutes for Water Resources. And we serve as the New Mexico Water Research Institute. So with that, I'm trying to advance the slide. Here we go. This is a representation of a model we have that uses 30 million data points to characterize the water budgets of New Mexico in terms of stocks or storage and flows or fluxes. And we have a historical and a future period. And this is covering 4 spatial extents: the state of New Mexico, major watersheds, counties, and planning regions. And here's just a snapshot of the statewide water budget for the period of record from 1975 to 2010, showing major inputs in blue and major outputs in orange. And we focused on this approach because it gives us an idea of where the opportunities are for managing water to really make a difference for communities and ecosystems. This is just an example. If you look at groundwater storage, we have the greatest reduction in groundwater storage for the period of the model in southeastern New Mexico, because that's where we have fossil water that is not readily recharged by surface water. So when we deplete it, it is taken out of storage, and we see that in the reduced storage. I'll share these slides and you can look at the water budget model for yourself. Here's another example showing Lee County in southeast New Mexico with this continual groundwater depletion, which is just part of using groundwater in that part of the world, contrasted with Socorro County, where we have connection to the Rio Grande. It's a aquifer that's recharged by the river, and even though there's extensive water use in this county, we have not seen in this orange line depletion over time. We have in this water budget scenarios for the future using 4 climate models, options for the different economic efficiency and agricultural aspects of water use. And we focus on agriculture because it is up to 80% of New Mexico's water withdrawals. So looking into the future, what we see is, for the example of the San Juan River, our historical hydrograph is in blue. And in the future, we see an earlier peak runoff and reductions of 30 to 50% of flow. So with snowpack providing up to 80% of the lower Rio Grande flow, this is a real concern. If you look at the whole state of New Mexico, the blue is our historical hydrograph for this state, and we see that actually in both of these, you see that I guess the state is on top and the San Juan below, and we see earlier and less runoff. So what does this mean? This means less water into our reservoirs. This shows 1998 Elephant Butte Reservoir compared to 2021. There's much less storage in the reservoir. And we see less withdrawals. There's fewer surface water withdrawals. Although this shows in purple, the withdrawals have gone down, though our depletion has remained constant, mainly because we have more efficient crop water use. But what does that mean? That means with maintained consumptive use and less withdrawals, we're actually getting less aquifer recharge. So what you see here is for the Doña Ana County water budget, surface water depletions are falling from 1975 to 2017. That's in dark blue. But look what's happening to groundwater depletions. Those are increasing. This is agricultural depletions. So although the total water use is relatively stable, we are seeing more groundwater use. And this is important for the Mesilla Conejos Melanos because we're seeing increased depletions of groundwater. Right now, we're in a good situation. We're still getting recharge from surface water. This is where ditches, rivers, and fields percolate water to recharge groundwater. But we've seen, this is a study from Lee Xiaojia, just published, that shows since the mid-1990s, there's been less recharge of groundwater for 5 study counties in New Mexico. And this was done with change point analysis using the water budget. So this means statistically, using 6 different techniques, it's statistically a significant reduction in recharge, not only since the drought of the 2000s, but even beginning in the 1990s. If you look to the lower Rio Grande and El Paso for the Hueco Bolson, this situation is dramatic. These are aquifers along the Rio Grande, and we've seen since the 1940s a dramatic decline in aquifers in the Hueco Bolson. We see the Mesilla is starting to show signs of decline and relatively stable groundwater levels as you go north into the Rio Grande. So the danger is that our rivers dry up. I'm picking on Arizona here so that I don't have to belabor the condition of our beloved Rio Grande, Rio Bravo. But this is an example of Santa Cruz River in Tucson that used to be a flowing river and is now an ephemeral wash, mainly because of reduced groundwater availability, storage and lower water levels. If you look to the Mesilla, this is a monitoring well that's run by the U.S. Geological Survey in collaboration with probably about 8 different entities, the state, the city, the county, the Water Institute, showing in 2000, 2002, the aquifers started to drop in the Mesilla. We still get annual recharge from irrigation. Those are the oscillations. And then again into 2011 and 2013, water levels dropped again. And this happened in the 1950s. The water levels recovered again by the 1980s and 90s. We haven't seen a recovery yet. We've seen this lower water level without continued dropping, but without recovery. So basically, we're in a situation where the water levels have dropped in the Mesilla, and it changes by site. There's a lot of details that I'm not showing, but this would be characterized as the overall trend. This is just showing, again, here's the bioreservoir and kind of a depiction of seepage that recharges the aquifer, but in this case, dropped groundwater. So now I'm going to shift gears from our water situation to just some ideas for water management. And one is community conversations. I failed to attribute these to Mark Shealy, who's been running this whole meeting, and he provided these slides. We'll be hosting community resilience conversations as part of the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission Planning Unit's 50-year water plan for New Mexico. And we will actually talk to community members to see what they think about water resilience strategies, going around the state to the different representative types of hydrology and community makeup that are so diverse in New Mexico. And we'll actually document these stories of community approaches to resilience. I'll give you an example for the Mesilla. And then at our annual water conference, we'll actually go from this idea of looking at the history to going through some kind of game sessions to test complex approaches to water resilience. And that'll actually be part of the New Mexico 50-year water plan, along with a lot of data from other groups, some expert analysis from a host of different experts. So this is one way, look to the community. We've done this, Dr. Maxwell's done this in detail already in the upper Hatch and Mesilla Valley area, identifying issues that stakeholders think are most important for the water future. And those are erosion and flooding from the watersheds, water scarcity and aquifer depletion. I already talked about that in detail. Urban development in arroyo flow zones. The need for increased coordination to achieve goals for the region and reduce conflict, and coordinated watershed planning. So these are water scarcity, flooding. These are what issues that the community has already expressed that they care about. And one of the approaches to resolve these is watershed management. We talk a lot about what's happening in the valley where most people are concentrated in agriculture and urban zones. But you go up to the watershed, we can put in structures, water management, erosion, flow management to affect our runoff and make a meaningful impact on our water situation. So we're actually doing this with a couple studies in the watersheds that drain to the Mesilla Valley. In this case, we're putting in rock weirs, stone line, brush weirs, net wire fencing. Dr. Maxwell's working with undergraduate and graduate students to put these out on the landscape and test with untreated paired watersheds the effect of these on erosion, runoff, soil moisture, vegetation, So moving on from watershed restoration, what about working with technology and innovation to do a better job with our agricultural water use? Changing to drip is going to help conserve water, but those of you familiar with Jevons paradox will know that increased water use usually goes along with drip irrigation installation. There's an opportunity in the Mesilla Valley to actually have combined flood and drip irrigation. Use drip when it's groundwater, it needs to be pumped. Use flood when it's surface water, can leach salts and provide recharge. So Jorge Preciado for his PhD is working on this question. Can we do a dual system that gives us the same amount of plant water consumption, but also gives us more groundwater recharge? So I'm not going into the details of his study, but he has quite a nice setup, some really good collaboration from Stallman Farms to statistically and process-wise test this hypothesis with, I think his first results should be out within 6 months. Another approach, just stop using the water. So the state of New Mexico and the Interstate Stream Commission is, I'm just checking my time. I think I'm okay. Mark, if you could interrupt me if I go too long. This program started last year, continuing this year, allows participants to actually get paid not to use the water and farm their land. It's fallowing. It's for water demand reduction. It's not intended to be permanent. It's specifically designed not to have this land go into non-agricultural land. Last year, 24 agreements for 1,272 acres with 865,000 in payments. That's expected to be much higher this year. And you can see here the region in the Hatch and Mesilla Valley. Of course, what's the problem with fallowing? You get dust storms, environmental quality problems, weeds. And if you do too much fallowing, you don't get recharge. So we're actually doing a project to look at demand reduction while simultaneously improving groundwater storage. So the problem with the groundwater and surface water interactions in places like the Mesilla Valley, where the water's pumped and flood irrigated, is you get a positive reinforcing loop with, in the red here, if you need to pump the water to irrigate, your water levels drop and you need to pump more. If you can manage through fouling to actually decrease demand, and you can, in the green here, actually raise the water level, then there's less seepage. You can actually have more surface water irrigation because that water, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but I'm pointing to the bottom right figure. And once you have the groundwater table propping up the river and the ditches, you get more efficient conveyance and less need to pump. And you actually have a reinforcing, sustainable hydrologic system. So we are working with the state of New Mexico and stakeholders to initiate this project, using also some pretty interesting hybrid modeling and developing a decision tool process to actually help design where to locate fallowing and what cover practices to use to get that new reinforcing feedback loop that supports increased groundwater storage. All right, we had a question yesterday about desalination. We've done a lot of work with Bureau of Reclamation and other engineering ACES colleges in New Mexico State University to use treated brackish groundwater for an alternative water source. And you can go to this website and find a litany of these studies, and we found that there's a lot of opportunity and probably needs to be connected to some initiatives like closed agriculture, where there's less loss of water to the atmosphere, so that we can add to the water budget with desalination and then keep that water for agricultural production through basically glorified greenhouses. So you can check the link for that. And I have a couple more slides here, and then I'll finish up. So we talked about this some yesterday, but these are very complex systems with watersheds, different users. Of course, there's connected municipalities I haven't even gotten into, different crops and irrigation techniques. And these complex systems are even more complex when we go across the border. And our contention is that some system modeling that includes human and natural systems can help us better understand the dynamics and make better management decisions. So we're just starting to conceptualize some modeled systems for the border situation, where of course we have our whole domestic water and society interactions. Those are in the US and in Mexico. But we also have international human and hydrology interactions that affect both the aquifer. This aquifer is a cross-border aquifer represented in blue, and it also affects international interpersonal interactions across the border, depicted by the flags of the US and Mexico. So this can't happen without shared work. So we're really, this is my last slide. My opinion is that this sustainability of water in the border region requires a suite of solutions with some really innovative technology, good modeling, broad participation, and for next steps, shared discussions. So I think we learned, for example, that evapotranspiration isn't a huge concern for the conejos médanos in Mexico because there's not a lot of agricultural water consumption in that part of the aquifer. So we need to work together, just like we're doing community discussions in New Mexico to find our local concerns, do the same thing. And we're hoping to do this through the TAP environment, leading to things such as binational working group for the Mesilla Conejos Médanos, maybe a white paper like Commissioner Hiner mentioned yesterday for IBWC, if CELA also thinks that's a good idea. So I thank you for your time, and back to you, Mark.
Okay, thank you so much, Sam. Before we move on to our next presentation, I just wanted to see if there were any other questions, whether in the chat or if anybody just wants to unmute themselves and chime in with a question. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Sam. I'll move things along now to our next presenter, and Dr. Alfredo Granados, would you prefer to introduce Óscar Ibáñez?
Sí, Marco, muchas gracias. Gracias y de nuevo buenas tardes a todos los participantes en el evento. Gracias por estar con nosotros de nueva cuenta. Y bueno, pues es un placer para mí y un honor presentar de nuevo a mi colega y amigo, el doctor Óscar Ibáñez. Óscar Ibáñez es profesor investigador nacido en Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, con más de 35 años de experiencia como consultor en geotecnia, ingeniería ambiental y políticas públicas en México, Estados Unidos y Canadá. Más de 20 años como profesor universitario y más de 16 años de experiencia en la administración pública, específicamente en el ámbito municipal de Ciudad Juárez como director de planeación de diciembre del 92 al 95, después como director de desarrollo urbano y ecología en el periodo de octubre del 95 a octubre del 98, posteriormente como secretario técnico en la administración pública municipal de agosto del 2002 a octubre del 2004. Y luego fue secretario del Consejo Directivo de la Junta Municipal de Aguas en Juárez durante el periodo del 2002 al 2004. De igual manera, ha tenido bajo su cargo diversas responsabilidades en el sector público, dentro del ámbito estatal y federal, en lo que corresponde a temas del agua, de la planeación, del desarrollo urbano, de la ecología, de la cooperación binacional y de la coordinación institucional, incluyendo el de coordinador de asesores de la Dirección General de Conagua en la Ciudad de México. Recientemente se desempeñó como director ejecutivo de la Junta Central de Agua y Saneamiento del Estado de Chihuahua y actualmente es presidente del Consejo de Administración del mismo organismo. En septiembre de este año fue nombrado, afortunadamente para Ciudad Juárez, como representante de la gobernadora del Estado de Chihuahua en Ciudad Juárez. Cuenta con un doctorado en políticas ambientales por la Universidad Estatal de Colorado y una maestría en ingeniería ambiental por la Universidad de Texas en El Paso. Recientemente fue incluido como uno de los 50 líderes principales del sector agua en la ciudad, en el país, en México. Presidente actualmente de la Asamblea General de Usuarios del Consejo de Cuenca Río Bravo y presidente de la sección regional Chihuahua de la Asociación Mexicana de Hidráulica. Es importante la conferencia de Óscar porque nos dará la perspectiva de lo que se está planeando en el caso mexicano, específicamente en la región Paso del Norte, con respecto al futuro del agua en nuestra región. Y le damos de nueva cuenta la bienvenida al doctor Ibáñez y le agradecemos su participación. Óscar, el micrófono es todo tuyo.
Muchas gracias, Alfredo. Pues la verdad, nuevamente un placer estar en este foro. Ayer les comentaba que a veces era importante cómo buscar comunicar más ampliamente esta gran cúmulo de conocimientos. La verdad es que después de escuchar la plática de Sam, digo, otra vez, pues esta modelación, estas perspectivas de futuro y con todos los antecedentes de las interacciones del agua superficial con el agua subterránea. La verdad es que es un trabajo que lleva muchos años y que ojalá que todos conociéramos muy ampliamente. Yo voy a empezar les voy a comentar en general, de manera muy breve, cómo se ha dado la gestión del agua en los últimos años en Chihuahua. Y voy a aprovechar para comentar también la visión de la gobernadora, porque pues esto es muy importante, ¿no? Independientemente de que yo ahorita presida el Consejo de Administración de la Junta Central de Agua a nivel estatal, que la represente aquí en Juárez para esta región específica, no solo en los temas de agua, sino ahora me toca pues ver el tema de gobernanza del gobierno del estado, su interacción con otras instancias de gobierno, entre ellas pues la cooperación binacional. Es muy importante conocer la visión de la gobernadora. La gobernadora fue parte del Consejo de Administración de la Junta Municipal de Agua. Siendo ella alcaldesa de Chihuahua, tenía un lugar en el consejo. Y a mí me tocó asistir a una reunión donde ella asistió. Es raro que los alcaldes asistan a los consejos de administración de las juntas municipales. Sin embargo, ella estuvo presente porque era un tema, lo recuerdo muy bien, muy importante para definir la planeación vinculada de la ciudad de Chihuahua con las autorizaciones y las factibilidades de agua y cómo se iban a vincular estas dos realidades. Por un lado, la planeación de la ciudad y por el otro lado, la planeación de los recursos y las autorizaciones para nuevos desarrollos. Muy importante la labor. Pero luego también pude interactuar de todos los presidentes municipales con los que yo interactué como encargado de la Junta Central. Hay 67 en el estado de Chihuahua. El municipio que más invirtió en infraestructura de agua de todo el estado fue el municipio de Chihuahua. Y fue iniciativa de la alcaldesa, hoy gobernadora, exalcaldesa, hoy gobernadora. Y esta anécdota la quiero resaltar como para plantear el marco de lo que es su misión. Yo estaba representando al gobernador anterior y me sorprendía mucho que el municipio estaba iniciando una obra de alcantarillado de un colector muy importante, una inversión muy fuerte de 80 millones de pesos en una zona de crecimiento irregular, donde no había agua y drenaje. Y esa era una inversión pues que normalmente las hace el gobierno del estado o las hace la federación, con alguna participación del municipio, pero en esta ocasión era al revés, era el municipio el que había iniciado la inversión y luego invitó a la junta, en este caso la junta municipal, a colaborar para hacer ese desarrollo de infraestructura. Y yo le pregunté, le dije, en su momento a la alcaldesa, le dije, oye, ¿por qué decidiste hacer esta inversión tan importante por parte del municipio? Y ella me dijo, dice, ya me tocó andar aquí en campaña para ser electa, y me di cuenta de que en esta comunidad la gente tenía más de 20 años sin tener agua y drenaje. Dice, y para mí lo más importante que le podemos dar a la gente es el agua y el drenaje, porque es la base a partir de la cual se puede empezar a desarrollar una comunidad. Esa claridad y esa congruencia, además, una cosa es que lo diga y que esté convencida, y otra es que le ponga el dinero a esa convicción. A mí me impresionó de la entonces alcaldesa. Cuando ella ganó la elección, me pidió que le ayudara a darle continuidad a lo que se estaba haciendo en materia de agua en el estado de Chihuahua. Por eso recibí el nombramiento de presidente del consejo. Y entonces lo que les voy a presentar, que es lo que se ha estado haciendo un poquito en los últimos años, luego les voy a presentar lo que se espera en el futuro, porque parte de esta visión compartida con la gobernadora. Voy a presentar le voy a pedir a Mark que me ayude a presentar el video del Top 10, que es un resumen muy cortito de las principales 10 acciones que se hicieron en los últimos años. Y luego las voy a comentar y voy a retomar la charla. Muy bien, este es como podrán ver, pues es una especie de top 10, así como los presenta ESPN, ¿no? Las mejores jugadas de la semana. Bueno, pues es una manera como de resaltar algunas de las cosas importantes. Pero si me ayudas, Mark, ahora con la presentación, quisiera ahora sí detenerme en explicar algunas de ellas que nos permiten pensar realmente en el futuro. La que sigue, por favor. Bueno, aquí están las que mencionamos, ¿no? Miren, esto de la conformación de los consejos de administración, ahorita los voy a explicar. Nada más señalo aquí lo significativo. El primer tema es gobernanza, es mejorar la administración de los recursos de las juntas, es un desarrollo institucional. Después viene la construcción de cosechas de agua que representó atender a los excluidos. Esto es trabajar en la sierra con las poblaciones indígenas donde nunca ha habido agua y ahí se invirtió. Luego las plantas tratadoras en Delicias, que es la única ciudad de más de 100,000 habitantes en el país que todavía no tenía sistema de saneamiento. Finalmente se construyeron 2 plantas. Y luego está el tema de drenaje pluvial en Ciudad Juárez, que igual yo creo que vamos a tener oportunidad de comentar brevemente. Esto es sumamente importante para la región Paso del Norte, porque es un modelo que nos permite recargar el acuífero, que nos permite un problema que es las inundaciones, convertirlo en una oportunidad de recarga, de recuperación del acuífero, de mejorar la infraestructura verde de la ciudad y además de obras de hidráulica muy, muy importantes. Luego, pues el tema de rehabilitación de plantas, que esto tiene que ver con que, acuérdense que la infraestructura de agua constantemente tiene que estarse actualizando, rehabilitando, reparando. La vida útil de la infraestructura de agua no la vemos porque está enterrada, pero bueno, pasan los años y una vez que se agota su vida útil, hay que estar reponiendo esa infraestructura. Eso hicimos con las plantas de Chihuahua y ahorita pues, están con lo más actual de la tecnología. Estamos trabajando mucho tecnología, medidores inteligentes, gestión del agua para controlar fugas, para ahorrar agua y evitar desperdicios. Todo eso tiene que ver con tecnología, uso de tecnología. Y luego la elaboración del plan estatal, que vamos a dedicar también a lo mejor un pequeño espacio, porque tiene que ver con esta visión de largo plazo, de futuro, consensada, acordada con la sociedad, revisada con un diagnóstico muy sólido técnicamente y con propuestas de ir cambiando paradigmas para mejorar la gestión del agua. Y bueno, este tema de la instalación de estaciones climatológicas nos da una idea de que la gestión del agua tiene que rebasar el ámbito estrictamente de producción de agua, de extracción de agua, sino que hay que pensar en todo el ciclo hidrológico. Hay que pensar en el cambio climático y por eso el tener la red de estaciones climatológicas nos permiten tener estos datos, esta información en tiempo real para ir procesando y tomando decisiones. Aquí sale una pregunta en el chat, la respondo rápidamente. Hay un plan integral de manejo de inundaciones en toda la ciudad, que es una inversión muy grande y que la tenemos que ver a futuro, pero se inició con las primeras obras. Digamos que se tenía estimado alrededor de 3,000 millones de inversión y ya se han hecho alrededor de 500 millones. Entonces estamos, digamos que fue un arranque de infraestructura pluvial de toda la que se necesita. En el caso de la inversión global, pues a lo mejor 5,000 millones de pesos no les dicen mucho, pero les voy a dar una cifra. Normalmente las juntas de agua invertían alrededor de 40 millones de pesos anuales de recursos propios y ahorita anualmente andan invirtiendo alrededor de 1,000 millones de pesos. Entonces el crecimiento de la inversión con recursos propios en infraestructura pues es de un salto significativo. La que sigue, por favor. En esta lámina pretendo explicar un poquito el esquema de administración, de gobernanza. Se modificó la ley y entonces donde antes las decisiones las tomaban prácticamente funcionarios de gobierno, lo que se hizo fue cambiar la ley y nombrar un presidente del Consejo de Administración que es ciudadano. El consejo quedó conformado por la mitad de ciudadanos que no tienen que ver con el gobierno y luego una representación del gobierno municipal y una representación del gobierno estatal. Entonces, en realidad, quien tiene mayoría en la toma de decisiones del consejo son los ciudadanos. Esto fue un cambio significativo. Luego, todas las reuniones del Consejo de Administración se transmiten en tiempo real, se graban y entonces todo el mundo puede estar viendo lo que se está discutiendo, cómo se toman las decisiones, cómo se resuelve el tema de las tarifas, los proyectos, todo lo que se tiene que hacer. Este cambio de transparencia, de rendición de cuentas y de gobernanza es lo que nos ha permitido ahorrar recursos y tener tecnología y profesionalización en los sistemas de agua. Esto es una decisión muy importante. La que sigue, por favor. El tema que les había comentado de agua para los excluidos. La siguiente lámina, por favor, Mark. Bueno, sí, ya está. Miren, esto de los sistemas de agua y las cosechas de agua, esto es muy importante porque en política pública, y esto en todos los países, no nada más en México, las políticas públicas se diseñan normalmente para atender a la población donde se justifica un costo-beneficio de la obra. Y esto normalmente solo sucede en las ciudades, porque en las zonas alejadas, en la sierra, con topografía o orografía muy accidentada, muy dispersas, los estudios de costo-beneficio no justifican hacer inversiones, porque sale muy caro por per cápita hacer las inversiones. Entonces, lo que sucede es que las políticas públicas pues dejan sin atender a la población más marginada. Entonces, cambiamos un poco el paradigma y diseñamos un modelo en el cual los usuarios, con algunos organismos de la sociedad civil y con una poca inversión de gobierno, hicimos un programa que nos permitió invertir y atender al 34% de la población que antes nunca había tenido acceso al agua. Esto es muy importante, logramos apoyos de fundaciones internacionales, de fundaciones nacionales que reconocieron este trabajo juntos de los usuarios, de la sociedad y del gobierno. Y algo increíble, se los puedo decir así, el que se haya atendido prácticamente la tercera parte de la demanda. Y la intención pues es que en los siguientes años poder atender toda la demanda de lo que yo llamo los excluidos del servicio del agua, ¿no? Me parece que esto es una acción muy importante y que va para el futuro, ¿no? La que sigue, por favor. Las plantas tratadoras de delicias, les comentaba, aquí se hizo una reingeniería, el diseño original de las plantas costaba alrededor de 450 millones, replanteamos los proyectos, hicimos 2 plantas, cambiamos la tecnología, aprovechamos algunas ventajas ahí competitivas y el proyecto lo redujimos a la mitad, una inversión de 220 millones, pudimos hacer 2 plantas y finalmente poder estar dando el tratamiento a esta zona, que es una zona agrícola, tiene un impacto regional muy importante estas plantas. La que sigue, por favor, en la zona centro-sur del estado. Bueno, miren, esto me había pedido el doctor Granados que les comentara del drenaje pluvial en Juárez. Esta gráfica me permite explicar con calma de qué se trata. Vean el tamaño del vaso 1 que nos permite captar el agua. A ver, ¿alcanzan a ver mi cursor? La flechita que estoy moviendo en la pantalla. Yo creo que no, ¿verdad? A ver, Mark. Ok. Ustedes pueden ver al fondo el parque y la ciudad y ven cómo viene la sierra y toda la parte de arriba. Toda esa agua baja a la hora de que llueve y baja por la avenida principal, que es la orilla del vaso que alcanzan ustedes a ver ahí. Esa es la avenida Panamericana y siempre es inundada. O sea, es una cantidad de agua enorme porque es una subcuenca muy grande, la cuesta y la cuenca de aeropuerto. Entonces, cuando llueve, se interrumpía y se cortaba el tráfico en la ciudad. Digo, en muchas partes de la ciudad, pero aquí de una manera muy significativa. Lo que ven ustedes es un vertedor enorme que está del lado izquierdo del vaso y luego una entrada de unos vertedores que se ven del lado derecho que jalan todo el agua de la vialidad y la meten a este vaso. Este vaso tiene una capacidad, en realidad es un sistema de vasos, son 4 vasos que están interconectados y son parte de la infraestructura del Parque Central que recién se rehabilitó. Pero la parte aquí más interesante es esa estructura que ven al centro del lago. Este vaso se diseñó como un lago recreativo para incorporarlo a todo el uso del parque, pero esa infraestructura que ustedes ven al centro son unos vasos que construimos, unos pozos de inyección que nos permiten, una vez que el agua se llena y llega a ese nivel, que es alrededor de 1 metro de profundidad, se sedimenta, ¿verdad?, el agua de lluvia, y el exceso de agua empieza a infiltrarse a través de esos pozos de infiltración, que son abajo de eso, esas son nada más las rejillas de acceso, pero tienen 18 pozos ahí abajo de esa estructura a 21 metros de profundidad que nos permiten empezar a recargar el acuífero. Ahora en la temporada de lluvias de Ciudad Juárez hemos estado infiltrando agua que antes simplemente la evaporábamos o se conducía y destruía toda la infraestructura. Ahora estamos recargando el acuífero, que es uno de los temas muy importantes aquí para la región Paso del Norte. No me detengo mucho más, digo, tiene más detalles toda la infraestructura pluvial, pero básicamente el paradigma es estar recuperando agua. Te pediría aquí, Mark, si me ayudas con el video de infraestructura verde, por favor. La infraestructura verde es lo que vamos a ver ahorita con los jardines de lluvia. Es un mecanismo que cambia el paradigma de cómo atender las inundaciones. ¿Cómo funciona? Tiene una excavación entre 2 y 3 metros hasta que llegamos a arena fina, que nos permite una infiltración rápida. Y entonces hay una galería con grava y roca que nos permite que el agua rápidamente se vaya.
A mí me da muchísimo gusto que estemos hoy inaugurando una parte de un plan y de un programa ambicioso que nos adelanta varios pasos, porque es una solución integral y lo que se hizo es escoger cuáles eran los proyectos y la inversión que redituaría más en la calidad de vida de los juarenses.
Bueno, ahí disculpen la música, yo no la escogí, pero bueno, está muy festiva. Pero bueno, el punto ilustra aquí, la infraestructura verde nos permite también manejar en las zonas planas de la ciudad, donde no tenemos manera de conducir el agua a ningún lado y que lo que hace es que se encharca y nos provoca unas inundaciones en grandes sectores de la ciudad. Dividir el problema y hacer captaciones pequeñas en estos pequeños jardines. Abajo no se ve la infraestructura, pero abajo es básicamente un vaso de captación igual, con un pozo de infiltración que nos permite captar esa agua y en lugar de que se vaya corriendo por las calles y se vaya acumulando y haga charcos, en cada pedazo, en cada jardín, vamos deteniendo una cantidad y vamos infiltrando, detenemos, infiltramos, detenemos, infiltramos. Y eso nos evita que se esté maltratando toda la infraestructura vial y que nos provoque caos, en fin, ¿no? Además, se pueden generar microclimas. Ustedes saben, la infraestructura verde es una de estas soluciones basadas en la naturaleza que nos permiten tener soluciones, mezcla de infraestructura gris con infraestructura verde y al mismo tiempo pues, poder recuperar también el acuífero. Si regresamos a la presentación, por favor, Mark. Perdón, no los quiero, espero llevar un ritmo más o menos dinámico de la presentación. La siguiente, pues, se rehabilitaron las plantas tratadoras Norte y Sur de Chihuahua. Les decía, estas plantas tenían más de 25 años de que se habían construido, entonces ya todo su equipo era obsoleto, ya había muchos problemas de funcionamiento, incluso de calidad, porque ya no funcionaban adecuadamente algunos de los procesos. Se hizo una renovación total, se cambiaron los turbosopladores, se cambió la tecnología de cloración a lámparas de ultravioleta, obviamente se modificaron el procesamiento de los lodos para concentrar lodos y poder generar electricidad con la digestión de los lodos. Vaya, tiene toda la tecnología actualizada a la época que nos permite hacer un tratamiento de las aguas mucho más ambientalmente respetuoso de la naturaleza, pero no solo eso. Todo el agua que estamos aquí tratando, una gran cantidad ya se está reutilizando en la ciudad de Chihuahua. En el estado de Chihuahua, la ciudad de Chihuahua es la que tiene más reutilización de agua tratada. Se está utilizando para regar parques, jardines, campos de golf y alguna para el uso industrial. Muy importante esto también, porque esto nos reduce la demanda de agua y nos permite en la reutilización darle algo de alivio a la sobreexplotación que estamos teniendo de los acuíferos, que bueno, pues aquí en Juárez esa es una tarea muy importante que está emprendiendo, y hacia futuro esa es una de las líneas de trabajo más importantes que va a tener esta administración, el fortalecer las líneas de moradas que nos permiten reutilizar el agua tratada en Juárez. Esta infraestructura va a crecer muchísimo en esta zona, igual para reducir demanda, para poder, insisto, aliviar la gran extracción que estamos teniendo de los acuíferos. La que sigue, por favor. Bueno, este tema de usar la tecnología, ustedes saben que pues, la medición, mientras mejor sea en tiempo real, que nos pueda generar datos, nos permite administrar más y hacer más eficiente todo el sistema. Entonces está cambiando la tecnología en varias ciudades del estado, particularmente aquí en Juárez, y se está vinculando con el ahorro de agua, con la conservación, con el mantenimiento de líneas, con mejorar el servicio, etcétera, ¿no? Tenemos información en tiempo real, una gran cantidad de datos que también puede servir para investigación y toma de decisiones del sector académico y del sector privado. Sí, por favor. Bueno, este tema de la gestión de presiones, en algunas ciudades, particularmente en Chihuahua, no se tiene servicio las 24 horas del día, sino que se usa el tandeo, porque el sistema así se diseñó. Se usan tanques de almacenamiento, se sirve una parte de la ciudad, se suspende el servicio en la mañana o en la tarde en algunos otros sectores, y entonces se tenía alrededor del 16% de la ciudad con servicio las 24 horas del día, los 7 días de la semana. Ya se aumentó al 33%, o sea, ya se duplicó en la mancha urbana de Chihuahua, que tiene servicio las 24 horas del día, y así va a seguir avanzando. Este es otro proyecto muy importante porque nos ayuda también a reducir el desperdicio de agua, a poder controlar mejor y evitar fugas, evitar robo de agua. En fin, esto mejora muchísimo la eficiencia física y, por supuesto, esto redunda en una protección otra vez de los acuíferos y de los costos que implica el funcionamiento del sistema. La que sigue. Bueno, esto del plan estatal hídrico, creo que hay un video, Mark, si nos das favor, ahí se ve, alcanza a ver precisamente la imagen del, hay una presidenta de un organismo de la sociedad civil que estuvo en ese parque. Ahí estamos bueno, ahorita les platico, ahorita que veamos el video. Bueno, muy bien. Digo, ya no voy a abundar sobre esto. Básicamente es la planeación de largo plazo. Se hizo participativa, muy regionalizada. Ahí están los objetivos. Ustedes los vieron. Y esta es la visión de largo plazo. Tiene un elemento institucional muy importante. Estos consejeros regionales son ciudadanos y permiten que la evaluación de los objetivos del plan se dé por parte de la ciudadanía, independientemente de la evaluación que las autoridades vayan haciendo de los objetivos y de los avances del plan. Entonces, esta combinación de gobernanza de la sociedad y de las autoridades de los tres niveles, de los tres ámbitos de gobierno, permite que haya esta planeación de largo plazo y que se continúe independientemente de las administraciones. Yo creo que este es un valor muy importante que le da mucha certeza a este ejercicio que está haciendo la gestión del agua en Chihuahua. La que sigue, por favor. Y esta última lámina, pues es la que sigue, por favor. Es un resumen de, adelante, todo esto creo que está en el video, adelante. Adelante. Bueno, la última, nada más esa gráfica. Miren, para poner en contexto, es la anterior. Para poner en contexto nada más el nivel de inversión que se hizo. Ahí están los últimos 20 años de inversión en el estado de Chihuahua en materia de agua. Y ustedes pueden ver en la gráfica de recursos propios, que es la línea verde. Ustedes pueden ver cómo a partir del 2017 tuvo un incremento altísimo. Hay una caída en el 2021 que fue el reflejo del tema de la pandemia, sí pegó. Pero vean cómo los recursos federales, que es la línea azul, han venido hacia abajo, hacia abajo, hacia abajo. Hubo también un aumento de inversión estatal, que es la roja. Y la inversión total, pues ahí está reflejada, la acumulada y cómo se presentó en cada año. Esto es, para hacer cosas en materia de agua, pues se tiene que invertir. Y para invertir, pues se tiene que tener una buena administración. Este es un poquito la proyección de lo que se ha hecho en los últimos años y las bases para lo que se pretende hacer en los próximos años. Yo estuve con la gobernadora, le hice el planteamiento, le hice la proyección del plan estatal hídrico, lo que se necesita, porque ella quiere avanzar más en la prestación del agua, en la incorporación de nuevos usuarios y de grandes obras que permitan mejorar cada vez más la calidad de la infraestructura del agua en Chihuahua y en ese sentido pues van caminando eso. Hay las otras áreas que yo sé que le interesan a muchos de los participantes de este foro, el tema del uso eficiente del agua en la agricultura, el tema de la tecnología, de la innovación en esos sectores que es muy importante para la protección de los acuíferos, están contemplados en el plan estatal hídrico y hay que darle seguimiento puntual a estas propuestas. Pues yo hasta aquí dejaría la presentación. Y bueno, pues ahí estoy viendo el comentario de la persona esta de Pradera Dorada en Ciudad Juárez, que efectivamente ahí se hicieron unos vasos para controlar las inundaciones y efectivamente pues es una maravilla, ¿verdad? Es increíble. Un lugar que era de total inundación, pues ahora es un área donde no solo quedaron bonitas las infraestructuras, ¿no? Que son para el goce ahí de los vecinos, sino que nos sirven para proteger y recargar el acuífero. Muchísimas gracias. Yo con esto concluiría. Este es el compromiso de continuidad y de tener una planeación con seguimiento, pues nos permite en el largo plazo pensar que vamos a tener cada vez mejores alternativas de solución para gestionar el agua en nuestra región. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. We'll now move on to Carlos Rincon. Okay, for the last 45 years, Dr. Rincon has been engaged in multinational collaboration centered on US-Mexico border activities in the field of natural resources, environment and agriculture, contributing as a participant from the private sector, as an academic, and most recently for the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Currently, he serves as the director of the EPA's Region 6 US-Mexico Border Program. Carlos is responsible for supervising the implementation of the US-Mexico Environmental Program, Border 2025, in coordination with state and local government officials, tribes, academia, and stakeholders of both countries. He also sits on the technical committee for the Paso del Norte Air Quality Task Force, which strives to reduce air pollutants to healthier levels by promoting initiatives, including economic incentives for implementing cost-effective strategies throughout the air basin. Dr. Rincon is a member of the technical committee for the Paso del Norte Water Task Force, which encompasses managers and community leaders responsible for water utilities, irrigation districts, industrial water users, and community experts, with a regional approach where data, best management practices, and water plans are shared amongst water use principals and managers. Dr. Rincon, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd first like to appreciate Sam and Alfredo for inviting me to share with you the U.S.-Mexico Border 2025 program. Of course, I'm always glad to share this panel with Óscar Ibáñez, in which we had worked for 25, 26 years, more or less, together in these binational endeavors. Throughout the program, and by the way, the section is called Water for the Future. And within the section is about Paso del Norte, water management within the Paso del Norte. And so far, and in general, all of the different sections and as well as the presenters, as it relates to water for the future, has gone into the aspect of water quantity. And of course, water for the future and management as it relates to the water is also has to do with respect to water quality. And the U.S.-Mexico border program, the Border 2025, which through the slides, you're going to see that it actually deals more with respect to sanitation and access for the communities to clean and safe water. So in other words, water quality. Also, as you can see there from this first slide, you see that working together to build partnership. And that's very, very important. And I'm going to put some examples with respect to water partnership. And also at the end, 2 examples of ongoing, even that has gone through Border 2012, Border 2020, Border 2025. 2 examples they are with respect to water quality initiatives, one in the Lower Rio Grande Valley of Texas, and the other one here within the Texas, New Mexico, Chihuahua region. It's important for me to share how is the organizational structure within the Region 6, within the office of El Paso. Later on in the slide with respect to Border 2025, I'm going to show you the organizational structure nationally, both in the US and in Mexico. So we are part of EPA Region 6, and our border office, our border program is within the office of the regional administrator. There within the office of the regional administrator, there is the Office of Communities, Tribes, and Environmental Assessment, or OCTEA. And especially in this Office of Community, Tribes, and Environmental Assessment, there are 2 that in the organizational structure are together, which is NEPA and Border Office. And NEPA, because as you have known and you will have seen in different border infrastructure projects that goes through the process of NAVBank certification, as well as the end NAVBank, the North American Development Bank funding and receiving grants from EPA. The NEPA is part of all of that. So in this case, I'm showing you so you're familiar with respect to our office as such. Now, As it relates to overview of the U.S.-Mexico border region, the program itself, this map shows, and by the way, you see there the logos of EPA and Semarnat, and of course also the North American Development Bank, because as it relates to border funding, the huge border infrastructure projects, even with grant from EPA, goes to the process of this institution. So this institution is a partner in this case within the whole program, but also as I will refer a little bit later in the slides, the U.S.-Mexico border program, Border 2025, and previously Border 2020, Border 2012, they are funding that through NatBank on request for proposals are sub-awarding funds to communities, eligible institutions, and that's money that is from EPA, from my program, but it is through NatBank. So that's why it is important, that part. Of course, you can see, and in this case, the whole region from San Diego, Tijuana, all the way to the Lower Rio Grande Valley region of Brownsville with Matamoros, is that area in which that's what the attribute, and yesterday John referred about the 1983 La Paz Agreement. So that was agreed as the 62 plus miles north of the border and 62 plus miles south of the border, or 100 kilometers on either side. And that's our border region. Within our border region that you see there, they are well-recognized pair of 15 sister cities. And in this case, is also part of the overview of the program. They are also within this partnership that I'm referring to. Just keep in mind always the first slide about partnership, because at the end, I'm going to refer and even give you examples, not about jurisdictions or entities of the state of the tribes, but actually communities. And in this case, there are 26 U.S. federally recognized tribes within the border region. Of course, in order to have this binational program in which you have and engage not only federal entities, and as it is right now, already with a true local bottom-up approach with the state and the local jurisdictions, in order to do that, it has to be within an agreement that it went through the process of legislators. And at the end, it was in August of 1983 that the La Paz Agreement was signed. Here, very quick, you can see that ever since the La Paz Agreement was signed in 1983, there has been 5 programs itself that I'm going to very briefly refer to the first 4, and then make more emphasis with respect to Border 2025 as it relates to water, which is the topic of our conference and what I was invited to. So as for the La Paz Agreement, the U.S.-Mexico border program is led right from the actual language of the La Paz Agreement and up to now by US EPA and Semarnat. So in this case, and talking about partnership, this presentation could be very well be given by a colleague of mine from Semarnat. Here across the border, one good example is Biólogo Gerardo Tarín. He could be doing this presentation in Spanish because he is within Semarnat as such. So the slides that I'm going to refer to are going to be through each of these very quick, but it's also important that in 1994, although the Border 2021 started in 1995, the 1994 is important because that's when the 1st of January 1994 was the start of the North American Free Trade Agreement. But as such, there were these institutions that were created. There is NatBank, and right now we only call it NatBank because for several years it was the Border Environmental Cooperation Commission, but later on they just merged into one, which is NADBANC. And then also in 1994, the Border Office of EPA Region 6 in El Paso and the Border Office of EPA Region 9 in San Diego were established. And in this case, we are carrying out the program locally with our partners as such. So the very first one has to do with IBEP, or PIAF, as it's called in Spanish. PIAF are the initials of IBEP as well. And this integrated environmental plan is the first binational border program. Prior to 1992, from 1983 to 1992, there was continuous high-level working on binational meetings, and they were basically in Mexico City or in Washington, D.C., or occasionally, in Dallas or in San Francisco, because it's Region 6 and Region 9, but it was very much federal officials in which they were putting together the language of annexes to the 1983 Paz Agreement. But it was in 1992 that the very first program started it, which is the Integrated Border Environmental Plan. And this one focused on enhanced environmental regulations and resulted in significant investment in infrastructure along the border. Here, with all of this 92 to 94 is where a good diagnostic and information came, so that when NADBANC was created, there was a need to have 50% by each country, approximately $12 billion to have border communities on both sides of the border attending the infrastructure needs as it relates to drinking water and sanitation. But of course, this program was operated 100% federally. So we're not there yet with respect to partnership at the local level, but it was operated at the federal level. Then we have the Border 21, which was 95 to the year 2000. This program, as you can see, was established 95 to 2000. And it was the very first program in which within the program itself, there were goals. And within the goals, there were working groups that were federal. So the 1995-2000 Border 21 program had 9 goals. And for that, from Washington, D.C., from Dallas, from San Francisco, and from Mexico City, there were members, official members, these 9 work groups. But of course, because he had already goals and objectives, there has to be in the ground interaction and some coordination with the states. So it was the first time in which the program was still managed and conducted federally, but having input and having discussions with the 10 states, as well as with representatives of the 26 federal recognized tribes. Then I'm going to go with respect to Border 2012. And once again, these ones I'm going quick because it actually starts giving already all of the framework and reference as to what it is right now, Border 2025. The Border 2012, that right here I'm showing ahead of time the 6 goals that the program had, from Border 21, federally conducted, it came down to 6 for Border 2012. And in this case, the Border 2012 started in the year 2003. And one of the biggest change that we see for this third interaction, the first one, IBEP, the second 21, and this one, the Border 2012, was the fact that the 26 US tribes and the US and Mexico states officially agree to be partnered and at the local level have executive coordination, just like EPA, Washington, D.C., and Semarnat, Mexico City, had that executive coordination of the program. And it was very important already to have a mission for the program that the basis of the mission of the program is with respect to the language that was in the 1983 La Paz Agreement. But every time it was improved as the reality from one program to the other, we have advanced toward the mission of protecting the environment and public health in the US-Mexico border region, consistent with the principles of sustainable development. Also, one big change is that it emphasized from a bottom up. That means that not only the state secretaries, or the case of Texas, the Texas commissioner and the governor for a tribe were in the executive group, but at the local level, the task forces for each of those goals were leaders on the US and on the Mexican side from the community, from universities. Of course, there were some from the local governments, because if you see on goal 5, it has to do emergency preparedness and response. That's basically a agua protección civil and fire departments, fire marshals, etc., had to do. So that one is actually by a government entity. The program created 6 goals, and within each goal, with a target at the end of the program, it included 25 objectives. And of course, the 6 goals are represented there. I mentioned that a big change was to have at the executive level the presence of the states and the tribes. Of course, always from the beginning, because that's what the agreement, President de la Madrid and Ronald Reagan gave that attribute and mandate to EPA and Semarnat. They are the national coordinators. And throughout the different interactions, they continue to be the national coordinators. But then, as we have states, pair states, California, Baja California, Sonora, Arizona, this region that we have here, Chihuahua actually has part of Texas and also the whole state of New Mexico in the border region. And then beyond Chihuahua, you have Coahuila, Nuevo León, and Tamaulipas. So you have Texas as being that part. So those are the regional work groups that had that executive presence at the highest level of each of the governments, being the regional work group chairs. Of course, there are issues that are actually border-wide. Environmental health is border-wide. Emergency response and preparedness as it relates to the Joint Contingency Plan, border-wide. And of course, looking into regulations and cooperative enforcement, those are border-wide. But then we have also topics that has to do with air, water, and hazardous. So those are the goals. They are within the program. But here you have, and actually the fact they are there in the base of all of this organizational structure is the task force, because the task force itself are where everything and is the way to engage the community and all sectors of the community. Many of you have been part officially or stakeholders or partners of the different task forces that we have. So in this case, Border 2012 had this region, and here, as I described on the graph, you can be reading the part. Of course, you have the EPA and Semarnat as being the regional administrators. You have, for this region, you have the Secretariat for Chihuahua, for New Mexico, and the Commission for Texas. And of course, you also have Isleta del Sur Pueblo. But within this region, you have sister cities, and for especially for the big urban metropolitan area that we call the Paso del Norte. For each of the 6 goals that the program had, a task force had led by representatives of the community. So there's the way of local partnership, not only at the executive level, but also within the task forces itself. And then, although it's not the subject of this geographic area, but within our Region 6 U.S.-Mexico border program, the same. You had EPA and Semarnat. In this case, you had 3 states, Coahuila, Nuevo León, and Tamaulipas. And at the Mexico City level, they decide which of the states is one of the representatives of that office of Semarnat. There is a counterpart of the executive regional work group together with EPA Region 6 administrator. And of course, once again, TCEQ, the Kickapoo, etc. So we get now to border 2020, and in this case, this program is an 8-year. Of course, it builds from what already had been achieved, and the different groups and official task forces they are within the region. So the program had 5 goals, 23 objectives. Remember, we had 25 in the previous one. We had 6 goals in the previous one. Now we had 23, and also fundamental strategies. Continue with the policy fora work groups, and we start working within the task force input at the task force levels in meetings, and with the executive, which once again are from the state office of the governments. We start putting together the action plans, which usually are 2 years apart. So in brief, Border 2020, we can, as you can look at the slide, I'm going to say that as such, from the beginning, it's led by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and Mexico's Semarnat in partnership with NatBank, and also working with the delegados at the regional level, works bottom up with local stakeholders. And it's not just to have the local stakeholders, but in meetings that we had for air, for water, for waste, emergency response and preparedness, etc., health, education, is that the community has an opportunity to give us its priorities on emerging issues. Also, that allows for leveraging on resources. Resources not necessarily has to come from money. If we have the mayor and the different departments of the city administration, the state, the academia, that they have undergraduate, graduate students, etc., carrying out projects, the technology and the contribution of the universities is a resource. Now, there's some projects as such, when they are sub-awarded with funds of EPA from to NatBank, that they also had matching funds. So in this case, it allows to have and leverage these resources. Just very quick, as it relates to border-wide, on the border 2020, that from 2012 to 2020, this was the total amount of RFPs that were in 2013, 2015, 2017, and 2019. Every 2 years, there was an RFP, and in total, there were 117 projects. Approximately US, meaning EPA, funded 5.7 millions and close to 6 and close to $4 million, which are matching funds from those that were, carrying out the projects. Now, here, if you look at this slide, of course, the mandate and the framework defines the region. That doesn't change. But now the Border 2025 builds up from the previous programs. And as you can see there, you have the mission, but also in several of the slides, you see here that I'm showing a link, and I invite you, in order not to dedicate too much time, but you in your leisure on topics that you are interested, that's a link that will get you to the English PDF program, which is the WRRI 2025. But also within the library of this conference, I uploaded the link also for the Spanish. So you will have access to that and you can go into more details. Continuing very quick on this. So in brief, the WRRI 2025, of course, always under the framework of the 1983 La Paz Agreement, builds out from the previous program that I already referred, the previous 4. It continues to have the 15 sister cities. We have the border for Region 6 of New Mexico down to Tamaulipas on the Mexican side. And it refers to we have within this region 11 task forces in WRRI 2025. And we have 13 committees, 12 of those in the region that we call the 4 states over there, Coahuila, Nuevo León, Tamaulipas with Texas, and 1 committee here, which is the Joint Advisory Committee for Air Quality Improvement. So here you see that now we have gone down to 4 goals. From 25 objectives to 23 objectives, we have now 20 objectives, but one huge improvement of WRRI 2025 is that within the sub-objectives of each objective, there is a measurable metric target to achieve at the end of WRRI 2025. And it's called WRRI 2025 because this is a 5-year program from WRRI 21 to WRRI 2025. So the organizational structure, as you recall, the one of WRRI 2012 that I showed you at the beginning, still you have on the top the national coordinators. Here is very important, and it has evolved and increased the communication task force, because it's important that constantly we put in the different social media what it has been accomplished, or meetings or activities that are soon to take place. The policy work groups, regional coordinators, task forces. We have the task forces according to each goal, but also geographically we have the different committees. And very quick, this is the 5 goals, the 4 goals. The goal 2 is improve water quality. And like I said, within the framework itself, on that link that once again appears here on the top, you can go and look into more details. But goal 2 has 6 sub-objectives. And in those, especially number 2, number 3, and a little bit of number 4 are actually projects that are within the millions of dollars. Dr. Ibáñez referred to on infrastructure, treatment plants, drinking water, etc. So it is within the framework, but of course, our U.S.-Mexico border program 2025, the grants that we sub-award from NADBANK is at the most of $100,000. But the ones that are $100 million, etc., those are also within the goals and objectives of the WRRI 2025, what with funds, loans, and grants that comes through the WRRI environmental infrastructure plan. So the action plan in this case for water is to increase collaboration and coordination. You know, Dr. Ibáñez referred a lot there about the different boards and consejos. You have the community. Of course, because our program is very much with respect to water quality, is to reduce the risk of exposure of the communities and the environmental landscape with respect to discharge of untreated water, improve drinking water, and of course, address the financial needs, which in this case, the resources are not only, we have two very, very well-defined in the millions of beef, and in the every other year, RFPs up to about $100,000 from Border 2025. But there's also within all of our partners that we have here, and this list could increase. As you are organized as a binational conference as such, and although you might be already part of some of these different binational partners, we can add those, and this is, to increase as such. So the community is very important to have them engage. So the meetings, which right now, because of the pandemic, have been like this, virtually, we have every other year request for proposals, which, by the way, I can just say ahead of time, NADANC is soon to launch, and soon meaning by next week, the Region 6 2021 RFP for Border 2025. And of course, we have the Communication Task Force, which is headquarters and border-wide binationally for social media, and of course, the collaboration. So here's some information. The request for proposal is launched, and from that moment onward, is not ACEQUIAS, is the North American Development Bank who owns, and is through NADANC that the proposals are submitted. And in this case, we also have the support from several of our divisions, Region 6 EPA divisions, on air, water, waste, Superfund, etc., which help us as volunteers. And in this case, the request for proposals is on both sides. So more or less, kind of wrapping up, we see that the program funding, we have internal, but we also have external. And once again, you saw on the total amount of $10 million that from the 2013 to 2019 RFPs, close to 6 were by EPA, but the other 4 by actually those matchmaking from those that submitted proposals. So those are the ones that have an internal funding. Just finalizing, here is the website, and I encourage you to click on the link that I put there several times for you to have a more knowledge with respect to the Border 2025. Also, and I will do it through Mark and Jeanette, I will ask NADANC, because once again, it's not ours, NADANC to send information about the upcoming RFP. As I see, all of you are eligible agencies and institutions to receive funds, but there you see within a dark red marker that you can click and link and put your name, and that way you are receiving all of the information, meetings, and especially opportunities for funding on both sides. Just as I have this final slide, I want to say that I'm going, and this is preceding, it starts in the back 2009, 2010, at the National Coordinators meeting. There was a meeting that had to do with respect to the Lower Rio Grande Water Quality Initiative, which is very much IBWC, SILA, but actually the one that is spearing and doing all of this is our state partner, which is TCEQ. And there is this ongoing group discussions from stakeholders, just like here, from agriculture, from industry, from agencies, just like this that we're doing with this conference over there in Texas, Lower Rio Grande Valley. And here locally, especially when there is transboundary sewer spills, there is an MOU that, because it's transboundary, IBWC and SILA are the ones that signed that engages the state of New Mexico, the state of Chihuahua, the Junta Municipal of Juarez, the Junta Central, also Homeland Security, because they are there at the border. Also, TRUA, which is the water authority for this portion of Doña Ana County, and of course, EPA. And every time there's a risk of a overspill, this MOU kicks off, and there's a protocol of communication in which you heard of Ingeniero Manuel Morales before. He actually then, Ingeniero Rascón, contacts the Junta Central, Junta Municipal, and to see that as soon as possible, that overspill is reduced. And just recently you saw with the storms and runoff that happened in this site, especially more in Texas, by Donovan, there's these water sewers and a lift station that kind of broke. And through this network of phones and emails, we're constantly being communicated by IBWC, the progress, because at the end, all of that sewer water is heading toward the Rio Grande. And with that, I stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for attending today's session. Alfredo, I'll turn things over to you if you just want to say a few parting words before we end today's conference proceedings.
Sí, muchas gracias, Mark. Bueno, pues muchas gracias a todos por permanecer hasta esta fase de segundo día de las conferencias. Los invitamos a que se conecten al grupo de discusión. La idea es que interactúen ustedes entre pares y puedan hacer conectividad y tener redes disponibles para ir creciendo en esta iniciativa de Dos Naciones, Una Sola Agua. Les invitamos para mañana, el último día de las sesiones, muy importantes todas las conferencias que se van a dar y la principal, que es la mesa de discusión que se va a dar con especialistas de muy alto nivel para que interactuemos con ellos. De nuevo, les agradecemos su asistencia y nos vemos en las mesas de discusión ahorita en un momento. Gracias, Mark.